IB Nation, what's going on? Welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. You are joining us live on a Monday if you're out there in YouTube land, which means, of course, this is Notre Dame Recruiting Hour. We have a really busy and exciting show for you all because, of course, we're fresh off the blue and gold game, which means one of the biggest recruiting weekends of the year and a lot of news to circulate after it. I know Brian and Vince just did obviously a great show on Saturday that was You're welcome. You're welcome. I saw got a lot of views, man. It was really good stuff. It was really good stuff. So, Brian, just go
people are fired up about the blue gold game, man. Right, and no matter how much some people might want to poo-poo on it, it was a great game, and it showed a lot of good stuff for Notre Dame. So, yeah, people are excited, which is good. It's good.
Brian, just to put this in the context, man, it was such a nice showing in certain areas and so exciting to have a little bit of Notre Dame football back. I was literally sitting in a hailstorm, man, and I didn't care even slightly because I was like, this is good football, and I'm excited about the possibilities. But with that being said, go back and check out that show that Brian and Vince did. Again, they did a long recap, did some mailbag questions, a little bit of everything in that show. Make sure to check it out. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, you should already have seen it because you should be subscribed to this podcast.
And if your thing is you don't like longer shows, which is totally fine, you can always go to the Irish Breakdown podcast app, and we broke it into different sections. So we broke down the offense in one. So I cut that out and just played the sort of the general overview, then the offense in one podcast, and we had the defensive breakdown in another one, and then we had the mailbag in another one. So we do that. So I've had a lot of people reach out, hey, your shows are too long. And that's fine. I get it. Not everybody is got the opportunity to be part of a longer show. We do cut those in. We got a lot of other things planned, so we're going to start taking these shows and cutting them into smaller parts too at some point in time. It just takes time. It's part of the process, but we are not going to change the length of our normal shows. It's not going to happen. People like it. It does really well, but I also understand and respect the fact that some in our audience just don't have the time or the desire to watch them. Totally cool. We'll try to help you out and get some content to you as well. And make it work for you as well. So that's just wanted to run that by people real quick. Speaking of that long show that we did on Saturday night.
Well, man, some people have ADHD like I do. So I fully understand. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But
we are ever seen Ryan by the end of one of our shows when it's been 3 hours?
I get a little antsy, man. I get a little antsy sometimes. The good thing is I used to be a special education teacher, so I do have some fidgets around at times, right?
All good.
But we are here to recap a very busy recruiting weekend, Brian. I mean, things got started crazy, man. I literally got into town on Friday. Friday night, Davion Dixon, star defensive tackle out of Miami in the 2025 class, commits to Notre Dame. Of course, Cole Mullins commits to Notre Dame the next morning. On Saturday, star defensive end out of Mill Creek High School in the state of Georgia. So Notre Dame had 2 commitments over the weekend, 2 public commitments, I should say. And we just left a weekend, Brian, where, again, man, I hate to be just all sunshine and rainbows, but what a weekend for Notre Dame football from a recruiting perspective, man. They really did knock it out of the park. We're going to work through some of the 2024 kids, some of the 2025 kids. Of course, we're going to talk about the new commits in the class and a mailbag at the end. So mailbag questions in the chat right now.
Ryan, I'm always giving you a hard time for using that phrase, knock it out of the park. You use that phrase a lot.
Man. They did.
But this weekend, I'm like, yeah, but I can't really say anything to them because it's that's kind of exactly what they did with a lot of different guys. So it was a really great weekend. Honestly, Ryan, the guys that we thought, and we'll dive into this at the end, the guys we thought they were close to closing on, we feel like they've done that.
Yeah.
Guys that we weren't sure where they stood coming in, they just crushed it with a couple guys. So now where it's like, okay, they're the team to beat now for some guys. And there's one guy that we're going to talk about that I'm really excited to talk about, but we're going to get there yet. That you and I love as a prospect, that we're just like, yeah, Notre Dame's just not a school he's really fired up about. Completely 180 story now.
Yeah.
After this weekend's visit. So yeah, it was, guys, they did a great job. Now, look, closing is the key, right? But they did everything this weekend they could to put themselves in a great position with a lot of really talented kids in this class that we'll get into. But Ryan,
yes,
we're going to start off with the kids that now are part of this class.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So there is no better way to start than with 2024 defensive end Cole Mullins out of Mill Creek High School in the state of Georgia. Of course, came off the board on Saturday morning. We had been hearing he was here during the week, and we were hearing obviously a lot of great things leading up to that. And so we kind of had a little bit of heads up that this is trending in a very good direction, obviously with Cole in between Notre Dame a player that we're fascinated to get into a little bit of the backstory and talk about the film and the fit and what's next, Brian, because this is a really, really interesting football player, man. Plays at the same high school that Caleb Downs, 5-star safety in the 2023 class that, of course, Notre Dame recruited for a long time. Actually, he was on campus, Caleb Downs, last year for the blue and gold game, which is kind of funny and a little bit ironic.
And Caleb Downs picked Alabama, right? Didn't come to Notre Dame, but Caleb Downs did nothing but praise Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame made it much harder for him to stay down south than people might have anticipated or might have thought. He did like Notre Dame a lot, so there was clearly some positive vibes being spread from him and his family. His family especially loved Notre Dame. I mean, because parents that sometimes look at things a little bit different, but clearly it was good to see them make. Because you talk about the backstory, Ryan, and a week ago. Maybe 2 weeks ago, you and I would briefly mention Cole Mullins, but barely, because as much as I loved the kid as a prospect, and this is going to be a fun one because you and I do have a slightly different opinion of him. We both like him, but just a slightly different opinion of him. I've been a lot higher on him for a while, as you know, but we just don't talk about him a lot because it didn't seem like there was a lot of traction. Although, as soon as he got offered, pretty much he had set up a visit for Notre Dame, but then there just wasn't a whole lot there. And the Notre Dame staff and the people that we would talk to, the different I should say the Notre Dame staff, but the different sources we talked to would say, hey, the staff likes him a lot, but they're just not sure how he feels about them. And,
he's a Georgia kid. And exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But then he comes on the visit, and kind of leading into the visit, there was starting to be more communication. Max Bulla and Al Golden were really heavily involved in this, along with Al Washington, but the staff effort. And then you start hearing a little bit more good vibes. And then the story comes, boy, we're really looking forward to seeing how this visit goes because we think we started to make up some ground. And then, boom, the visit just blows the kid away. And before he leaves, he has given Notre Dame a silent commitment. And then, of course, goes public at noon on Saturday. So they closed this one in a hurry, Ryan. And we'll talk about it after we talk about him. But it shook some things up in defensive line recruiting. In 2024, because there were some dudes they straight passed on to take Cole Mullins that are much higher ranked players, which should give you an indication of what this Notre Dame staff thinks of Cole Mullins. And I tend to agree with them, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot to like about Cole, which we'll get into obviously during this segment, right? It's the fit wise from a just personal perspective, obviously a very good student as well, comes from Mill Creek High School in Georgia, which is, they just won a state championship, right? And they played in a very high classification in Georgia. He's a 6'4", 240-plus pound defensive end, and a guy that is starting to get a lot of traction, or was starting to get a lot of traction on the recruiting side of things as well. I mean, you mentioned on a previous show, Brian, like all the ACC schools had basically offered at that point. Tennessee was another school that had offered him. Miami was a team that, was trying to make a push for him and everything. So very interesting football player, man. There's no doubt about it. And I think that's a great place to start, is that this was a one, and you hit on it already, right? This is a player that we thought that, we knew that Notre Dame liked Cole Mullins a lot, but how realistic it wasn't something that really came to the forefront until very recently.
Right. Because we had a very long conversation about the Smith twins last week. Like, these are good football players. Are they needle movers? No, they're not. They're good football players.
Yeah.
But we also said it's not a given that they're going to end up in the class.
Yes. Because
are they going to pick Notre Dame? But is Notre Dame going to push for them? And I thought that was something that was interesting too, Ryan, is Notre Dame liked the Smith twins, but there was never, as you know, because you got to know them pretty well, there was never that push from the staff to try to convince them to commit, right? Yeah. Even on their most recent visit, when they started talking about maybe moving their timeline up, that was more them than it was Notre Dame trying to convince them, because what you and I knew is there were two kids specifically that were going to be visiting the week of this blue gold game that they really wanted to see where they stood with.
Yes.
And that's Cole Mullins and Malachi Williams. And those are two guys that this staff likes a ton. So when you look at Cole Mullins, again, this is one of those ones you can look at the rankings and not like it. And I get it. He's a 3-star kid from 247, or excuse me, he's a 3-star kid on 247 on 3 and Rivals all have him as a 3-star. And 247 and Rivals just now named him a 3-star basically this past week.
Yeah.
Right? They hadn't even evaluated him prior to this week. But really good football player, big-time program, and I'm very high on him, Ryan. So when you look at it, let's begin with the class impact aspect of this, Ryan. So, we're going to look at what landing Cole Mullins means to the Notre Dame class. Obviously, from a recruiting ranking standpoint, this doesn't move the needle at all. If anything, it brings down your overall average grade because he's a 3-star kid. For me, I don't care because I love this kid. He graded out as a top 200 player for me right now with a 4.5-star upside, right? Because there is some projection to edge. But he does play the edge in high school, but he also plays a lot of Mike, and he's just kind of getting by on God-given ability. And so I look at this kid and I see it. This is a 4-star kid to me, Ryan. He is. And you talk about, okay, they need at least 5 defensive linemen in this class. 5 is the target now. There's a chance they'll take 6 if the 6th is the right guy.
Yeah.
So, like, if they're sitting there at 5 and Elijah Rushing or Malachi Williams want to come, I believe that they'll take one of those 2 guys, right? And so, but 5 is kind of the target number, and they need ends. They need at least 2 ends in this class, and they need a guy that can play Viper in this class. And right now, the staff views him as a Viper. Having said that, one of the things that I believe that they love about him, and from talking to different sources, is he's not a Viper only. Yeah. He is a guy that right now they love, and we'll get in when we watch the film, I'll show you why I see him as a Viper. But they love his all-around game. They love his potential as a pass rusher, and the fact that if you watch him as a linebacker, he's very rangy. He's a kid that can drop. He can be in a 2-point stance and get up underneath the curl route. He can drop a hook into the hook curl zone pretty effectively with his length and athletic ability, in my opinion. He's a guy that can run on a wheel route with a running back like we saw from Isaiah Foskey. Now, are you going to take him out and put him in a 2-point stance over top of a tight end and say, go run up the seam and man-to-man coverage? No, that's not. But you're not doing that with any Viper, like who's a true defensive end. And so I'm good with that. But he's also a kid that measured in his visit at over 6'4" and over 240 pounds. And so the frame is there to where he could end up being an Isaiah Foskey type, where you and I felt Isaiah Foskey could clearly play the Viper. He literally set Notre Dame's sack record as a Viper. Yes. But I think you and I have talked about this, Ryan. And so if I'm remembering wrong, please correct me. But where we said in an ideal world, he's your field end in this defense, Isaiah Foskey is. Now, I don't know if Isaiah Foskey would have wanted to do that, but his game projects much better to that, in my opinion, as a power rusher than it does as a Viper.
Right.
And if you could have put a true Viper with Foskey as a field end and allowed him to be more of a true end as opposed to the way that Notre Dame had run in the past, which is kind of like they had like 3 D tackles on the field and then the Viper. You know what I mean? Which is what it was in 2021 with Myron Tungavaloa-Mosa, and it was that way to a degree last year with Riley Mills. I think Notre Dame is transitioning to try to have more of a true end at the field as opposed to, so that's why you're seeing Boubacar and Armel and some of these other guys that they're recruiting for that big end position is more of that type of player. But he has some ability to be that guy as well. And so what it does, and why I think this recruitment is important, this commitment is important for Notre Dame, Ryan, is because he has that flexibility. Where you're going to play him is going to partly be determined by what do you fill this class out with. So let's say let's say they get 3 ends in this class, and I'm just going to kind of throw a couple names out there. Let's say they get Bryce Young, for example.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think of another end. Another big end that they're looking at, Ryan. Let's say they get like 2 big end types, and that's where Notre Dame is.
If they view Benedict Ume as a big end,
right? That's a good one. And again, that's just a name. I don't know where Notre Dame. I'm not predicting that Notre Dame's going to get him. We'll see how things go on the visit this weekend. But let's say it's a guy like that, Ryan. Let's say it was a Darian Mayo type who they're not really like in on right now, but just that kind of that more pure edge kind of guy. Brandon Davis Swain is still in the class for argument's sake, something like that, right?
Sure.
This kid's a Viper then. You're good with it. But let's just say Notre Dame hits a grand slam home run. They get Bryce Young, and then let's also get a Malachi Williams or an Elijah Rushing, and you project them more as a Viper. You can then put Cole Mullins over to the big end position as well if the need be, field end position if the need is there, and that guy's now your Viper. Or in a dream scenario, he gets up to 265 and he maintains his athleticism, and you've got a Bryce Young, a Boubacar, and Armel playing field end, and you've got, Josh Burnham and Junior and Elijah Rushing or a Malachi playing Viper, and this kid can play both. He can play all over. And kind of partly how I see him, Ryan, in my comp for him, and I don't think you're going to like this one. My comp for him was Marcus Smith from Louisville. Just kind of looking at him at similar body type. Really, I think he's got a really nice explosive twitch. But if you're going to look at Notre Dame, think of a bigger, longer, more athletic version of Justin Adamiola is how you could really fit him into this defense where he can play all over your defensive line. That's what I see from Cole Mullins, and that's a pretty dang good comp, Ryan, in my opinion, as far as fit. If a taller, longer, more athletic Justin Adamiola is a pretty good player for Notre Dame the last couple of years as a rotation guy.
Yep.
This kid brings that ability as a starter type of talent. And so when I look at the fit, that versatility right there, Ryan, is huge for Notre Dame, in my opinion, for how they're going to shape out the rest of this class.
Well, that's the biggest sell for me in this one, Brian. I mean, honestly, is I also see him as a 4-star. I'm slightly lower on him, but I still like him, right? There's still a lot to like about Cole Mullins. But the big sell for me is that he isn't necessarily just taking up a Viper spot so you can't recruit any more Vipers, right? It's projection wise, could he be a strong side defensive end? Yeah, I think he can. Because honestly, that's the stuff I love about his game most right now is that kid plays super physical, man. He plays with great leverage in the run game. He's got powerful hands. I mean, we'll see it on film, right? Where if you put him up against tight ends, good luck, Mr. Tight End that has to block Cole Mullins. It's just not going to be. It's not going to be a fun time. So I like the kid as well.
Or as a Viper, you got running backs trying to chip on him, right?
Yes.
So yeah. That versatility is important, right? Sorry, I apologize for that reaction, everybody. I took a sip of that tea my wife brought me, and I was expecting it to be a little bit cooler, I should say, than it was. So I was like, oh wow, okay. But yeah, I think that versatility, Ryan, is important, and I do, and yes. You, that is the one thing you have always said about him that you definitely like about him is the fact that he does bring some positional flexibility, in my opinion. And 100%. Honestly, Ryan, if he does get up to a 265, he's a kid that when you go to your dime third and long package, you can stand up over the 3 technique. This is partly where that Justin Adamiola comp comes from. You can stand them up over 3 technique because they have a look in their dime where they'll put 1 D tackle on the field and then 3 ends, or 2 ends and a Viper, like a linebacker. So only 3 down linemen personnel wise, and rush the quarterback that way. I could see a guy like this to me if he can get to the size I want on 3rd and 8. He's trying to whoop the guard in those instances, and so there's a lot you can do with him there, in my opinion, that I really like.
Not a direct comparison, but from a role perspective, maybe a little Khalid Kareem-ish in how you could potentially use a Cole Mullins.
Maybe. Yeah, I think Ryan, if depending on the roster shakes out and how his body shakes out, I could see that.
Yeah.
But that's what I love. But I could also see him being a Foskey-ish type as being a bigger Viper. And that's the thing I like, where Khalid was a big end only, right? But to your point, if he does end up at big end, Ryan, very similar to Khalid, where I would say the Khalid comp makes a lot of sense as I think about it, the type of production that he gave. Khalid was Khalid Kareem in the last 10 years, in my opinion, was Notre Dame's most impact run defender. Because if you look at his numbers, he had back-to-back years where he had 10-plus tackles for loss, but he never had more than 5.5 sacks.
Yep.
Where Isaiah Foskey last year literally only had 1 tackle for loss that wasn't a sack all year. This year only had 3.
Yeah.
It had 5+ every year. I think 1 year had 10.5 tackles for loss and 4.5 sacks. And I could see Cole Mullins being that kind of guy, Ryan, where he can get you 5-6 sacks as a big end, but he's going to be really disruptive with that athleticism because I think, to your point, I think he's a pretty good athlete as a Viper. If he ends up being 265 and keeps his athleticism, he's a really athletic big end.
Yes.
Field end. And so that production that he brings, that production could be the best production we've seen, because we haven't seen production like what Khalid had since Khalid left. Adi Tagumba Ogundizi was a much better pass rusher than Khalid, but he wasn't nearly the run defender that Khalid was. I mean, Khalid Kareem was an outstanding big end when it came to defending the run, at not only setting the edge, but making plays in the run game. Again, I'll pull the numbers up here now, Ryan, and just kind of to point it out to you. But he had double-digit tackles for loss in each of his last 2 seasons at Notre Dame.
Yep.
And in both seasons, he had similar, like lower sack numbers. He had 10 tackles for loss in 2019, 5.5 sacks. And then he had 10.5 tackles for loss in 2018 and had 4.5 sacks. That's a lot of production. So in 3 years, when he was in the rotation, he had, 2.5 run stops for loss. Then he had 6, so that's 8.5. Then he had 4.5. That's 13 run stops behind, like, tackles for loss in the run game. And no one else comes close to that. Not on the defensive line. There's a bunch of linebackers that got to there because it's a different game. But there's not a lot of defensive linemen that come anywhere close to that in the last 10 years, Ryan, including Stephon Tuitt, who the year that he had the great year at Notre Dame, where he had 11 sacks, only had 12 tackles for loss.
Yep.
So this is a kid that if you start comparing him to that, then all of a sudden I can dig that, man. I can dig that for sure. Yep. But I think that playmaking ability is there, and that's what I like. He's got playmaking potential. Let's dive into the film, Ryan, and show people what we're talking about with him. I should have probably tested this beforehand because sometimes StreamYard gets really funky and it's like, today we don't want to let you do it
with Huddle. Yeah, man.
They're gonna let us do it, so we're gonna check him out. But what you're gonna see on this first clip, guys, is you're gonna see him playing linebacker and defensive line. And the first thing I love, Ryan, is look what he does to this offensive lineman. Hey,
man, he's physical, man. You don't have to sell that part to me, right? Like, this kid is a downhill seeking missile as a player. He absolutely is.
This was a playoff game, by the way, folks. This isn't against some bum team. This is a playoff game that he did this to.
And he plays at a high classification in Georgia for Mill Creek. Like, he's playing good comp as well.
Yeah, I actually watched this whole game, Ryan. If you're not sure of Cole Mullins, there's actually a lot of really good YouTube film, like game film, like TV broadcast, which is maybe not great for receivers and DBs, but for defensive end is really good. And you're going to see a kid that has a lot of power. Now, here's something else they're going to see, Ryan. He doesn't quite, he's just kind of winning like he's playing on the street, right? He's just like this move right here. Like, this is a really nice move. He's going to have to learn to use his hands a little bit better. But look at the size of this kid he's going against. Like, that's a big boy.
And that's all hip flexibility right there. Yes. To your point, he's not using his hands at all. He just kind of gives a little shake, and then he's able to flip his hips and turn, right? Like, that's all he's doing there.
Yeah, that's athleticism right there. That's just pure athleticism.
Some looseness to him, man. There's definitely some looseness. I love this play, though, man, where it's just like, oh, you're going to put a tight end over me? Okay, guy. Just explosive through the hips.
Literally takes 2 dudes out. He takes the tight end and drives him right into the running back. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, against the level he's playing against, Ryan, this is big time.
It might honestly be my favorite clip of all his film, man. This kid is my dream. Like, at times I'm just going to line him up in a 6 technique over a tight end and just tell him to beat the what out of this guy. Yeah. Like, that's him, man. That's
somebody in the chat, Jason Smith, said that the pad level is awesome. And here's an interesting thing about him. His pad level is great when he gets into a 3-point stance. He does need to work a little bit on keeping his pads low when he's in a 2-point stance, but that's a technical thing. But it's correct. He does a great job of exploding out vertically. Here he beats the tight end inside and just blows the play up. Yeah. I mean, you guys are seeing it, y'all. I mean, this kid makes a lot of. I mean, he is really explosive to me off the ball. I really like what I see from him.
I really like him out of a 3-point stance, man. I really like him out of a 3-point stance.
Well, I get it. He's a powerful. I mean, this is what you talked about earlier, Ryan. You're going to put tackles and guards on them. I mean, tight ends, and this to me looks like it's a tight end wearing a offensive lineman number.
Yeah,
right. He's lined up like a tight end, and so they put a 6th offensive lineman on the field to try to block him, and he just whoops the kid inside and makes
that probably tells you how that game was going for that offense. Yeah, too. That probably tells you a little bit of Cole was probably having a pretty good game if they wanted to do that. So.
And this is another one. He arrives at the football with a lot of force, a lot of force.
He has a lot of linebacker traits, Brian. He really does, because he comes to balance as a tackler very well. Like he delivers blows, man, because he just looks like he's always in a solid power position. I guarantee this kid is a great squatter, a great power cleaner. Like, I guarantee, because he just looks like he always is in that power position.
Look at this. I want to know who this tight end is, Ryan. I want to try to find out what game this was, because this guy looks like this kid's big. This tight end's a pretty big kid, and he doesn't even use his hands. He just whoops the kid athletically. Yep. Now, here's where I think I've had some people say, I'm not sure about his athleticism, Ryan. There's another play in the backfield. And this is where I think some people are missing the boat. These next couple of clips, you're going to see some range from him working to the sideline that you're going to be like, that's twitchy. Actually, that's not the clip I was thinking of. He's got some clips where you're going to see him chasing down quarterbacks from a Mike linebacker position. Yep. I'm going to be like, don't tell me that this kid's not athletic enough to play Viper. When I see that, right? Like, I don't want to hear it. I think you can put him in some goal line stuff and let him block. I mean, just look how physical he is. Like, he doesn't use his hands well at all. I think this might be one of those plays. Yes, this is actually one. Look, first of all, watch how fluid he is, kind of changing direction a little bit, right? He's very nimble, very, very nimble athlete, and then just watch the burst here. He's got one more, and just the closing speed there. This kid can cover a lot of ground. He can really cover a lot of ground. This is a really athletic play right here. Watch this scrape. Watch this flow and scrape. Look how nimble he is athletically. And then just eat that run up. Just eats it up.
And if Notre Dame is going to transition to maybe a little bit more 3-down looks at times, Brian, where it's like a true 3-3 type of look, he could play some Sam linebacker. Well, it would be the Viper in this defense, who would just play as a Sam in the defense. But he could play some of that as an off-ball player at times, I think.
This play right here is another example of this kid technically needs a lot of work. He just crashes into this guy, and then he just bullies him. I mean, this isn't great. This isn't great. This is not what I would put on teaching tape for a good example of proper block destruction on the second level, right? But he just bullies this kid. He just says, okay, I'm going to drive
power.
you.
It's power showing,
raw strength.
Yes.
Just absolute raw strength. But the point is, now again, am I putting him at linebacker in college? No, I'm not. But he looks comfortable in space. A 6'4", 240-pound athlete that looks comfortable in space. Look at him picking up this crossing route. And he runs with this kid and just sniffs him out and brings him down.
And again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but for people that are just joining us on YouTube, he's playing for Mill Creek High School in Georgia, which is one of I think the second highest classification in the state of Georgia. And Georgia plays obviously very good football. So he's playing some guys, man. He's not playing against a bunch of bums.
Right. I'm actually gonna look up their schedule, because their playoff schedule was impressive. I think they beat Buford in the playoff, I believe.
Yeah.
Buford has a ton of D1 kids.
Yes, always.
Yeah. Just look how nimble he is. Again, technique, not great, but just really fluid, smooth athlete. 240-pound kid making that play. Trying to get to the really nice first step. Look at the recognition, Ryan. He's an instinctive kid, because the guard to his side blocks down, but he has his eyes up. He stays on his path. He reads the ball and he gets there. He's a pretty instinctive kid too.
He is.
He really is.
I think the cool thing too, Brian, is that he's asked to do a lot on this defense, obviously. So if we're talking about upside, we haven't really seen him play one position yet. I mean, that's one thing that we all have to remember about high school. And this is even true to Isaiah Canion, who was on campus this past weekend in Notre Dame. It's like he's asked to do so much for his team. It's not fully easy to evaluate exactly what he's going to be at the next level, because you aren't seeing it consistently, right? That matters.
They played Buford in the regular season. Excuse me.
Gotcha.
They did not beat Buford in the playoff. They played him in the regular season. I know that they played Buford. I've seen the clips. I just thought it was on the playoffs, but it was not. It was regular season. They beat Milton in the playoffs.
Milton.
So this is the play, Ryan. Watch this closing speed. Look at that. This is the one where I was like, okay, he's running. And then right there, that gear, come on now.
It's good.
That's moving. That's a 6'4", 240-pound athlete doing that. Just FYI. You guys want to know, why are you hyping this kid up? He's a 3-star. That's why. Well, look at this film and you know who he's playing against, and tell me that this is a 3-star athlete. Right? I mean, I don't see it. I just don't see it. I think if anything, he's getting hidden by the fact that the competition is so good that it gets massive.
It is a really weird ranking because, again, he's playing at the highest classification in the state of Georgia with a player who was just a 5-star recruit in 2023. I'm just like, why exactly? I mean, and he was productive too. It wasn't like there was no production. Like, he was productive for them as well. It is a curious ranking for whatever reason.
They beat Meadow Creek, North Cobb, Westlake, Atlanta Westlake, Milton, and Carrollton in the playoffs. That's who they beat in the playoffs.
Carrollton, who has the Juju Lewis kid, the 2026 quarterback. And Milton, the tight end, obviously Ryan Gee, that Notre Dame is on in the 2025 class as well.
And Carrollton is, I believe, let me see. I'm trying to see. Yeah, Carrollton beat Colquitt County the week before, beat Walton. And then they went out and this is the score of the state championship game, 70-35. So
it's wild, man.
Pretty wild game. Yeah. So that was a pretty big butt whooping there. So it was, it was an impressive game. It's kind of funny. Like, they lost to Buford, but beat Walton. Walton beat Buford, but they lost to Buford. That's why you don't do the transitive property stuff when it comes to football.
Oh, I love the transitive property. I love it.
No, you don't. That's Mr. Sarcasm pop rearing his ugly head today. So, but yeah, Ryan, I think people see it. This is a really athletic kid that's still learning the game fundamentally. And she's just getting by on God-given ability. That's not a knock on the coaches at Mill Creek at all. It's just he's a big kid that's doing a lot of different things. And then it's hard to get a kid to master his technique when you have to – and that's what hurt Jalen Sneed a little bit. Not hurt him. I think it helped Jalen Sneed. But one of the things that the reason he's not so much a fundamentally sound player right now is because he played quarterback, he played rover, he played defensive end, he played linebacker, did a little bit of everything. So this kid's an excellent football player.
And Brian, again, we have to also remember that he's being asked to do everything on a team that just won a state championship, right? It's like I don't blame the coaches for doing that because obviously it works.
Right, because they're teaching him how to play football. It's just I'm referring to like just that next level, really nuance. Detail. He's playing both ways. He's playing some tight end, blocking tight end. This is not at all a knock on Mill Creek. He's also a junior in high school.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure people understand that. So I like what I see from it. The kids can play, Ryan. This kid can play.
I can't wait for the question we're undoubtedly going to get at some point that says, hey, if he doesn't last with the defensive side of the ball, can he be a blocking tight end in goal line
and
situations?
The answer is yes. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. So, Ryan, let's talk next about the class impact or the what's next. Next, let's talk about what's next as we wrap up this portion of the show. 2 of 3 down. Obviously, you got Owen Wafel in the class. Notre Dame wants at least 3 more. They want at least one end, at least one interior guy. I think ideally, what Notre Dame would like to do, if they're only going to get 5, is to have 3 ends and 2 interior guys.
Yes.
I think right now you've got your nose potentially in Owen Wafel, who is where I think Owen's best suited. You've got a guy here in Cole Mullins, who to me is the swing guy that can do both.
Yeah.
And then ideally, perfect world, you land a true Viper and a kind of a pure big end type of guy.
Yeah.
And I think the big end Notre Dame has identified. I think they'd really like Bryant Young. Now they got to finish
Bryce
up.
Young.
Bryce Young, sorry. Yeah. Bryant Young's kid. Sorry. I meant to say Bryce.
Can Brian come play too? I mean, he can play.
Did you see him at the game on Saturday? Dude, still didn't. You see what I'm saying?
I actually walked past him on campus. I'm like,
that's what I was asking you because I know you were over there while the recruits were. Does he not look like he could still play football?
Yes.
I mean, like seriously, he looks like he could still play football. That guy is in good shape. He embarrasses me when I see him. I'm like, God, that guy's older than I am, and he looks phenomenal.
He embarrasses me too, man. He embarrasses me too.
I think Bryce Young is their top target at the big end position. And then there's 2 guys that I think the staff really loves at the Viper position. That's Elijah Rushing and Malachi Williams. And then inside it's Justin Scott. So if you want to know what the dream class is for Notre Dame at this point in time, it's Cole Mullins, Owen Wafel, Bryce Young, Justin Scott, and 1 or 2 of. I mean, if we're doing real dream classes, like, you get Malachi and Elijah Rushing, but I don't want to get stupid with it. Right. Give me one of those 2 guys. That's sort of the home run dream class. That's now you're stacking up against anybody. And I think that's kind of that's what I like to see from this kid, Ryan, or this class, Ryan, is that type of versatility. But this is an important piece of this because this is that kid that can do a little bit of everything for you as an edge. And that's very important to have a guy like that. Very important to have a guy like that.
I think that was the great thing about this weekend of recruiting, just intel. And obviously, boards at irishbreakdown.com, we have a long thread of, I think, some really good intel. I don't know if anybody agrees out there, but you should go sign up at boards at irishbreakdown.com if you want to take a peek. Everything we're talking about today, by the way, for the entirety of this show, is in that thread. So you can go back and look at some of the intel early. I mean, you would have had that guy, what was it, Sunday morning, Brian? We put the initial list out, right, as far as all the intel we were kind of collecting from the weekend. But I think the great thing about this weekend, Brian, was that we got a lot of insights on what the class is probably going to look like when all is said and done, right? We got a really good understanding because obviously you get the commitment from Cole, which, we're going to keep hitting on here, right? But Bryce Young was on campus. Malachi Williams was on campus. Like TJ Lindsay was on campus. There were some guys that we had, questions as far as the fits, what's ultimately going to look like. I feel like we got a lot of clarity this weekend. And of course, it started Saturday morning, especially with Cole Mullins or Saturday afternoon, with Cole Mullins making that commitment to the University of Notre Dame. Like you said, I love, and I know you already hit on it, so I know you like it as well, the fact that this kid is a versatile player, right? Like, I don't think we could just say Viper next to his name. That might be where he's classified early. But this kid, I think, could also be a strong side defensive end or Notre Dame's field end, however we want to classify that position, the big end. I think he could play Viper. I think he could do a little bit of everything, which gives you versatility because it's like I can fit him in with a Bryce Young, for instance, on the field. But I could also, I believe, eventually fit him on the field with a Malachi Williams, with an Elijah Rushing. This kid makes fits make sense, which I think we need more. We need more of, right? That versatility makes fits make sense, and it gives you multiple possibilities, which I think is an interesting thing to have on the table.
I want to respond to something before we move on to the next commitment. Matt Giles did ask this question, and I think it's pertinent to this. Matt said, does this mean he's not taking any other official visits? So what we have seen from Notre Dame, it's a good question, Matt.
Yep.
Well, we have seen from Notre Dame this recruiting cycle is if a kid wants to silently commit, they basically say, okay, that's fine. You can tell us that, but don't go public with it. And we're not counting it as a commitment until you're ready to publicly commit. And the conditions for a public commitment are you aren't taking any more visits. Now, are there some kids that they might make an exception for? Sure. But even with Justin Scott, he was kind of ready to commit, but he still wanted to take visits. And they said, no, dude, just relax. You don't need to rush this. Take your visits. And I think that's kind of the way to go. We know of several kids that have committed to Notre Dame in recent weeks that we don't really count as commitments because you and I are taking a bit of a different stance this year as well, because we did get burned last year by some guys who kept saying, no, I'm locked in. I just want to take some visits to enjoy the process. Now, most of the kids that did that stayed in the class.
They did, yeah.
But there was enough to kind of, you and I mean, Ryan, how long before Jaden Lamar decommitted that I kept telling you, I'll be shocked if that kid ends up in this class? And you agree.
It was weeks, man. It was weeks.
I mean, you could just read the writing on the wall when he kept going to Arizona and Oregon and places and, Peyton Bowen. It's like, that's one that I screw because I made the mistake of taking the kid and the family at their word. And what I come to realize is that he was not being honest with the family. I think the family was being honest with us, but I don't think he was being honest with people. And so we got burned, right? And we're not going to make that mistake again. We're gonna say, okay, this is what he's saying, but right. But Notre Dame has learned from that, and they're just basically telling kids like, look, don't commit until you're ready to commit. There's no need for you to do a silent commitment, especially if they really like a kid. Like Justin Scott's easy. Justin,
yes,
I don't care if we get commitments from 8 defensive linemen. If you want to come, we're taking you, man. Like you're our guy. And same thing with Elijah Rushing. Like, dude, you don't have to worry about other ends committing before you. We'll take you whenever you want to come. Like Notre Dame is technically full at cornerback as far as what their needs were, but they told Caleb Beasley, like, man, I don't care when you want to come. We'll take you whenever. And there are some guys like that. And that's how you could get to 6 in this class, in my opinion. But I do think it's smart that Notre Dame is doing that. But yes, by Cole Mullins going public, he has essentially told the staff he's done.
Yes.
Same thing with the next young man we're going to talk about. So that is something that you can And if a kid talks later about taking visits, I mean, he's kind of gone back on what he has told the staff. Otherwise, they wouldn't have let him go public. And that's why some of the movement we saw this weekend is not public yet, because a couple kids want to take a couple more visits before they announce their final decision. And that's why we're not saying who they are, or what the case is. So that's kind of where we are there.
Yep. And I think it's a great way to, kind of put the bow on Cole. It's a really nice pickup for the University of Notre Dame, obviously. Their second commitment on the defensive line in the 2024 class, joining Owen Wafel, defensive tackle out of Hun School in Princeton, New Jersey. So I think tremendous pickup, obviously, for Notre Dame, and got the Saturday really kicked off well before the blue and gold game with a little bit of excitement, hit on a little bit of what's next for Notre Dame as well. But, Brian, we want to hit on, obviously, moving on to actually what was the first commitment in the class. Before we do, though, hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, 5-star reviews if you're listening to us on any of your favorite podcast platforms. And as always, make sure you go to irishbreakdown.com and boards.irishbreakdown.com. We have recruiting intel. We have obviously a lot of team analysis for the blue and gold game this past weekend up on the site. I know Brian's broken up obviously the offense, defense, and really taken a deeper dive into what he saw on film on Saturday. And you should go back and listen to that show, obviously, that Brian and Vince did, breaking down kind of more of an instant reaction type of analysis piece on Saturday after the blue and gold game. But we're going to get into Davion Dixon next. But thank you all for listening to this section of the Irish Breakdown podcast. So, Brian, we're talking about Cole Mullins. We're talking about the blue and gold game. But the first commitment of the weekend was actually on Friday night with Davion Dixon, who's out of Belen Jesuits in Miami, Florida, 2025 defensive tackle, 6'2", 305 pounds, considered a top 200 recruit in the class by the I think it was 247. I think if I remember correctly. Yes,
I believe so. Yeah, or on 3. Actually, I think it was on 3.
It was
now that I think about it.
But
I'll look now. I'll get it before you're done with your next sentence. I'll have it down.
So this one, Brian,
Rivals.
Rival. Oh, Rivals, really?
Yeah.
Rivals stepped up to the plate. Oh, the 2025 kid. Love that, man. Love that. Davion Dixon, defensive tackle, 2025. This was a really interesting one, Brian, because I feel like for the longest time, we've known that Davion Dixon was high on Notre Dame. Like, he doesn't hide it, right? Like, every time I've talked to him, he's just like, yep, I really like Notre Dame. I really like Notre Dame. I'm like, cool. But I did not expect this to happen this weekend. This was a little bit of a surprise. Exactly.
No, nor did he. Ryan, you and I both had a chance to. I believe you sat down and talked to his mom and him this weekend as well. And it was funny. I was doing a TV spot on ABC 57, and I was walking out to the car in between the two spots because I had to go out to the car, finish getting the Cole Mullins article prepped for the noon commitment, and then I was going to go back in. And I was walking out, and I see Davion and his mom get out of their car, and I just stopped, talked to him a little bit, and thanked him because he had done an interview with you. So I just thanked him for, hey, thanks for doing the interview with Ryan, and we got to talk, and just a really good kid. Mom was really awesome, and but they said, look, we didn't. I said, man, I wasn't expecting you to commit this weekend, and he just starts laughing, and his mom was like, we didn't either. And so that kind of, honestly, in my head, that was a bit of a red flag. Like, I'm okay, is this emotional thing? Then he starts talking, and then when I hear when the mom starts talking too, and they start explaining it, it was more of just it wasn't an emotional thing. It just kind of clicked, and it just was kind of like, this is what we've always been wanting and waiting for. Like, I think he's been on campus before. I think he was on campus last summer for the workout, but it just was like, he got on campus as sort of a focused recruit, meaning like last summer was like, let's work out, let's see what you got. But now that they've built that relationship, and it's just kind of like, where else do we want to go? I mean, he goes to a really good private school in Miami. Yep. It's a Catholic school. And the family was just like, this is it. And the kid was like, this is it. This is where he wants to be. He didn't know that last year, Blue Gold game, they also started the class off with a defensive lineman again. The staff told him that after the fact, Ryan.
Yes.
But it just was one of those things where they did come into this not at all anticipating, because I asked folks around the staff, like, hey, were you guys expecting this? And they're like, no, no idea. Like, we knew that he, like you said, we knew he liked us a lot, but they weren't really pushing him to commit.
Right.
And I thought that was the good thing is he did jump on board early, but it wasn't something where he felt pressure. Just like I've been to other places and nobody stacks up to Notre Dame. And this is a kid that comes from a background and a family that, like, the whole aspect of development is important to them. Yes,
Sure.
he's a great football player, or has a chance to be a great football player, and a lot of talent. He had like 30 tackles for loss and 10.5 sacks last year as a sophomore.
It was wild, man.
But
Yeah.
they also understand it's the academic piece. I think somebody told me it's like a 3.8 GPA.
Yeah.
And the fact that the spiritual aspect too, they're a Catholic family. The spiritual aspect too was important to them. And it just was like, where else am I going to get all of that other than Notre Dame? And I thought that was a pretty cool. When they explained that, I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like, now I get it. Now now the red flag is put back in the pocket, right? I feel a lot better. I mean, look, it got 2 years to go, right? But I felt a lot better about this. Because what's your first thought, Ryan? Well, we had a defensive
Brandon
lineman
Davis
come in
Swain.
last year's spring game. It hit him. It was emotional. We weren't expecting it. He just got there and got emotional and decided to commit. And look what happened.
Yes.
That was my sorry, I can't lie. That was my first thought.
It was mine too, man. I didn't even wait for someone to say it on the board. As soon as I saw he committed, I was like, man, we've been here before, haven't we?
Right.
Like, we've been here just last year. I mean, a calendar year from the first commitment in the class.
Who was the first commit in the 2023 class as well? It's Keon Keeley.
Oh yeah, Keon Keeley. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, man, we've been down this road. So I immediately understand, because that was my impulse, right? So like when people say, oh man, we got 2 years to go, we've been here before, I totally get it, guys. I totally did. I will say this, to Brian's point, eased my mind a lot when I spoke to Davion, because he talked about a lot of the things you just hit on, Brian. It's like, one, he's a very mature kid for his age. I mean, that's important, and that's important. It is important. But he talked about a lot of
emotionally and mentally, he's mature. He's not physically mature, which is a good thing. He's got a baby face on him, and he's got a lot of young 15-year-old weight on him as well. But anyway, continue.
No, and I think the maturity is a big thing in this conversation. It's also huge why this happened the way it happened. He talked to me about, this is something I've been thinking about for a little while, right? But like, he talked about that moment. You always hear about that moment when things happen, when it's over. It's over for you. And he talked about that, right? He kind of sat down and he's just like, his direct quote was to me, his parents said to him, he's like, or I think he said it to his parents, and he said, this is where I want to go. What am I waiting for? Right? Like, what am I waiting for? It's when you got to put all those things together, I feel a lot better about the situation. But again, I completely understand the initial reaction to that, but I don't think that that's what it was. I just think that this was a kid that was ready, and kids all have that moment at completely different times. Some have it on National Signing Day. Some have it when they were sophomore in high school. It happens for everyone very differently. And I think Davion had that moment, which is why he committed to Notre Dame this weekend.
Well, and Ryan, I think it's very fair for fans to have the reaction that we talked about, because we had it. But I also think we need to remember that every kid is different. And that's why we wanted to explain to you guys that Ryan and I both had. And when we talk to them, Ryan talked to Davion over the phone to do the commit story interview, and then got a chance to meet them face to face. And I got a chance to meet them face to face, because I'm a big believer in you look somebody in the eye. And that's the one thing that I really liked about talking to Davion and his mom, is they were both great with eye contact. Like when I'm talking to Davion's mom, I can feel him staring at me, like just like listening to what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Just like and I mean that in a good way. Like that was really good eye contact. He wasn't putting his head down. He wasn't looking around. He had a really good eye contact, and that to me is something that I look for as a coach, to say, okay, mom's telling me all these wonderful things, and then the kid's like looking off into space, and like that mom's telling me what mom wants at this point in time, not telling me what the kid wants. But when the kid is like locked in and engaged, and I could see him kind of nodding his head when mom was talking about certain things about Notre Dame, you're like, okay, yeah, this is a different deal. This is a bit of a different deal. And he's a good football player, Ryan. I mean, he's raw. He's young. He's got a very young body, young build, young frame. He's going to have to do a lot of reshaping. This kid's a good football player. And I mean, the class impact, okay, you got your nose. You got back-to-back noses. And here's the thing too, Ryan. Talk about class impact, and we'll pull up the film there in a second. But I love the fact that they've already got a 300-pounder on the board. And one of the concerns I had, I saw he was listed at 6'2". One side had him listed at 6'3", not 6'3", but You look at the film and you're thinking, I'm not sure how tall this kid is. Like, is he even 6'1"? Like, I mean, honestly, that's what it's hard to tell in the film because he's got that round body, and it can sometimes be hard to tell how tall those kids are. You and I both got a chance to talk to Davion, and let's just say it this way. I'm a little taller than you are, I believe.
Yeah.
We're close to the same height. I know I was looking up at him, so I know you were looking up at him. Yeah. He's at least 6'2" in my opinion. He's a legit 6'2" in my opinion. And and he is just big, Ryan. Like, he's got baby fat. Man. He's got to work off, but he's not a fat kid. He's just big.
He's massive.
Broad shoulders, big chest, wide hips that are just like not fat wide, but just thick. He's just a big boy. And that's the kind of nose that I like, because that's not the kind of kid that requires to have that core fat to be 300 plus pounds. Yeah. This is a kid that just God made him 300 pounds. You know what I mean? And as he reshapes his body, he's going to actually weigh more because he's going to turn some of that baby fat into muscle. And he's going to be, I mean, this could be a kid that could be a smooth 315 pounds when it's all said and done. Because he's a sophomore in high school right now, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's perfectly said. I think that this is how you drop a nose tackle on the college and NFL level. Like, this is the body type that you're looking for. I mean, he's not quite Vince Wilfork as far as being, quite as massive, but again, he's a sophomore in high school, and that's what you kind of want to see in the nose tackle position on the next level. Brian, what have I said about the nose tackle position that we keep talking about over the next couple cycles? Impact size, right? Impact size. This isn't just a kid that's just going to play at the point of attack and just be an immovable object. He can do those things. But as we pull up the film here in a couple minutes here, right, it's the fact that he also is a playmaker at that size. He has the ability to create impact in the backfield, tackles for loss, sacks. He has that type of upside to him. So this is what you want in a nose tackle in the modern game. This isn't just your clog two gaps and you're just not moving, right? This is a kid that can make some plays as well, which I think is what Notre Dame needs more of. They need that impact size in the middle of the defense.
If Notre Dame is able to land Justin Scott, and as of right now, we still feel Notre Dame's the leader for Justin Scott, you're going to have three interior guys in a 2-year stretch that are going to be 300 plus pounds, because Owen Wafel will be easily 300 pounds.
Oh, easy.
When it's all said and done. Yeah. And have you ever seen his dad? Like in person?
Yeah.
Like, I saw his dad. Did you see his dad this weekend?
Yeah.
He's massive.
Like 6'6", man. He's a big
and
dude,
massive.
Big dude.
Like, that is like, that's like, I don't know whatever I ranked on Wafel. It's going to get higher. If his dad ever asked me, I'm changing it the next time. I'm just going to tell him to his face.
Top 50 recruit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, sure. Of course he's better than Justin Scott, Mr. Wafel. Of course, that's a big, I'm joking, of course. That's a big guy. But you see the DNA, right? And here's the other funny tidbit. His two younger brothers look just like him in the face. It's my wife's taking pictures of recruits, and she's like, I thought this was Owen Wafel. She took 2 pictures of his little brother because he looks just like him. It's hilarious. But he's already 292. He's going to be 300 pounds. And so one of the things that people have complained about is you need beef, you need beef, you need beef. And I've always said, I think beef can be a little overrated. You don't need it. I want quickness. I want athleticism. Why does Georgia thrive? Because they get 300-pounders that can move.
Yes.
And that's what this kid is. So we'll bring the film up now, Ryan, and we'll look at it again. Keep in mind, this is sophomore film that we're going to look at. This is Davion Dixon, who is from Beelan Jesuit Prep. That's the correct way of saying that, right, Ryan?
Yep.
And so he wears number 60. So you're going to see a kid that, again, nice little spin move there. He is a nose. He is a pure nose. But he's a kid that's for his size, Ryan. He's very nimble for his size. That's the thing that stood out to me.
I think that's a good way to put it, Brian. I mean, this kid's not going to be like straight line as fast as some guys, right? But he is quick. Like, that was one of the underrated things I did think about. I mentioned Vince Wilfork a little bit ago. Vince Wilfork wasn't great because he was just an immovable object. Vince Wilfork was great because he was so quick for his size, man. You're like, how the heck does that guy move laterally?
Look at this. Look at this. He's looping outside. Plants has to work back inside, and look how quickly he closes on the quarterback there, right? This is a 300-plus pound kid. This is a really nice play right here.
And you're getting
on a lacrosse field.
Yes, I know. I saw that too. Impact defensive lineman out of what state as well, Brian? Out of Florida, man.
No, Ryan. He is not from Florida. He is from the state of Miami.
True. That's a good point.
Come on now. It's the state of Miami. But yes, no, in all seriousness, he's a Florida kid. But look, Notre Dame doesn't get kids from Miami very often. At least ones that are impact. Look at the quickness off the ball here. Now, again, the competition he's playing against is not as good as the competition that the other kid's playing against. But look at the center. This is a good-sized kid that he beats.
Yes.
He just whoops him on his way to the quarterback and then chases the kid
I love how the center just looks up. He's like, oh, man, I just got whooped. That's going to be on film now.
Great. Yep. I just got my butt kicked. Yeah. So a lot of the film can be a little hard to see in this setting because it's a lot of all 22, but you can see it on a bigger screen. This kid's got some quick. Now, this is a nice clip because you can kind of see the get off here compared to everybody else, just how quickly he gets off. Now, I do want to see him keep his pads a little lower out of his stance, Ryan. This is an example of it, but this is really quick. This is really important. You know what he is? He is a much bigger version of Jacob Lacey. That's what he is. He's about a 30-pound bigger version of Jacob Lacey, in my opinion.
Because Jacob was quick, man. He could really move inside gaps. Like he was a one-gap penetration style player, right? I mean, this kid can do the stuff at the point of attack because he is a natural 300-plus pounds. But he also has that quick twitch, man, where you're like, okay, my guy can take a gap if you give him a gap. Like he can do those types of things, which is great.
Yeah, you don't got to. And he uses his hands really well for a young kid. That's the other thing I noticed too, Ryan. He does. I mean, there's work, but look at that. Look at that push pull that he does right here on this poor little guard.
I know.
Like, look, physically, this kid can't match up against him, and you evaluate that, and you say, hey, look, he gets to college, he's not going to just do that easily to a Division I guard. But what you evaluate is the quickness off the ball, which is good. And then the other thing you evaluate is the technique. Look at that push-pull. Rocks the guy out and then just tosses him to the side. That's that block destruction that we were talking about. That quarterback just took a dive. Did you see that?
Yes, he did. He was like, I don't want any of this smoke. I'm good, man. I'm good.
I am going down. I am throwing this and going down.
One of the key things I look for at the nose position too, Brian, is popping your hands, right? The initial contact that a player can create and initial power that a player can create. This kid's got some serious pop in his hands, man. When he hits opposing offensive linemen, you see it. Like they have a little bit of that recarry, right? It's like, oh man, that guy just got smoked a little bit, and he has. I mean, and the production is just silly, right? I mean, again, yes. Is he playing the greatest competition in the world?
Right.
No.
His production, his production is inflated relative to what it would be if he was playing like in the Atlanta area, or if he was playing against the better schools in Miami, right? If he was playing against like Northwestern and all that. But again, the skill translates. That's the point, Ryan.
Yes.
He's not going to come to Notre Dame and have 30-some tackles for loss and 11 sacks, right? Like, I mean, like that's not going to happen. But you see the what he does to get the production translates to the next level.
Yep.
He doesn't just bull rush. I mean, they twist. Look at this. How many times have we seen him twist and loop around on different movements, right? I mean,
yep.
You got a nose tackle that's got, how long is this? This is a 10-minute highlight clip for a freaking nose tackle. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And you're thinking, like, when I first saw the clip, I was like, there's going to be a lot of just boring plays on this. Because, like, I'd seen him a long time ago, but I hadn't really watched him, Ryan, because, I mean, I didn't anticipate him committing anytime soon. And I haven't really watched a lot of 25 kids at this point, at least not any linemen. And so I'm like, okay, let me pop on the film. And I'm like, 10 minutes of a nose tackle? This is going to be a lot of boring film, like him taking on two gap. And I'm like, holy moly, this kid just constantly making plays.
Yeah, man.
He's constantly in the backfield.
And he's a kid.
And look what a lot of these lead to, Ryan. How many times have we seen a pick or a ball almost get batted down on a play where he's getting in the quarterback's face? Because what is the fastest? When a defense lines up, who is the closest guy to the quarterback every single snap? It never changes. Whoever's in the A gap.
Yep.
And so if you got a guy in the A gap that can penetrate, nobody gets to the quarterback in a more direct line where if he wins, he's right in the quarterback's face.
Yes.
And I've said this before, as a former quarterback, I would much rather have to deal with an edge rusher that got free than a guy up the middle that got free.
Yep.
Because the guy that got middle up free, it's like, I got to spin out and hope there's nobody else coming. Where if it's an outside guy, I can just climb the pocket. right? And
Yep.
get the ball off, or even still it was a lot easier for me as a quarterback to throw with about to get hit from an edge player than it was, because I could still step into my throw and say, hey, I'm just about to get hit in the face right here, but I'm going to step in and throw this football. It's you can't step into a situation where a nose tackle just kicked the center's butt. There's nowhere to step into.
Nobody wants to step into chaos, man. No one wants to step into that.
No, that's how you turn the ball over.
And this is a kid too, Brian, that, I mean, just for some context for folks, obviously we had the big pot of gold offer list on St. Patrick's Day. This kid was offered months before the pot of gold. So this is a kid that Notre Dame identified very early in this process.
Yeah. I think that was a concern maybe some people had too, Ryan, was, well, is this a kid they really wanted? Was this a priority kid for them? Or was this just some kid they liked, but they didn't want to say no to him? No, this is a priority recruit, Ryan. And I think that was a great point you just made, that this kid got offered, in February, right? Like early
Something
February?
like that. Yeah, he was early, man. He was early.
Way before. Because what they realized is the way his offer list was blowing up and the kind of player he was, that we can't wait. We can't wait a long time to get this kid out. We got to let this kid know right now that we like him. And the fact that he had been on campus before helped that too.
Yes.
They have been able to see him and size him up and all that kind of stuff. I think that helped as well, in my opinion. So
getting a kid from Miami, man, never hurts. Never hurts.
We're not going to watch all 10 minutes, as impressive as it is, Ryan. But, look, to me, this is a really good pickup. I mean, you and I have talked about this, Ryan. To be elite in college football, I don't care what anybody says. Yeah, you need skill and all that. Sure, you need a quarterback and all that. But on defense, to be elite, you have to be elite up the middle.
No doubt.
And it starts up front.
Yep.
And they're getting better there. We saw that in the blue gold game. A guy like Jason Onyé breaking out, Donovan Hinish, Tyson Ford had some flashy plays. You've got Devin Houston coming in. He'll get healthy. You've got Owen Wafel right now, but you need to start adding some more difference makers. And this kid has a chance. Again, he's just a sophomore.
Yep.
He's got a chance to be a big-time player. He's got a chance to be a top 100 guy when it's all said and done.
And he also is going to be one of the biggest players on the roster from a weight perspective.
Yes.
The minute he steps on campus too, which is,
right.
I mean, again, man, we talk about, you talked about Georgia a couple minutes ago, Brian, as far as getting impact size on the interior.
Yeah.
The one thing too, man, is that they just have these kids in drones, man. It's like, oh, Bear Alexander leaves, no big deal. We still have this Nazir Stackhouse and Warren Brinson and these cats, right? I mean, start stockpiling type of these impact defensive linemen, and I think Notre Dame's going to be in a great spot, because that is one of the separators for a lot of these games, man, is who is better up the middle, who is the best player in the best team in the trenches. I mean, you think back to the TCU Georgia national championship game, right, Brian? What was the biggest difference in that game? Georgia dominated them up front. Dominated them. It was not even close.
It was that, and their when receivers were wide open, the TCU guy hit it, or the Georgia guy hit it, and the TCU guy didn't. But what was part of the reason that Max Dugan wasn't hitting it? Part of it was because he was having guys in his face the whole game.
Yes,
and that was part of it as well. I mean, let's not discount that as a factor into this thing as well. So you got to be good up the trenches, man. So that's going to do it for this part of the breakdown. We're going to go next to kind of recapping how the weekend went with all the recruiting updates. But we did want to get to these two commitments because, again, we didn't expect this one to happen. We couldn't do a show Friday night because Ryan was in town and I was out on a date with my wife, and I just wasn't going to do a Friday show. And then, of course, Saturday we couldn't do the Cole Mullins show because we knew we're getting ready for the Blue Gold game. And so we just knew we could talk about them today, but this gives us a chance to really break these kids down and take a peek at them. So before we move on to the next section, though, folks, hey, do us a solid. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. And Ryan, obviously, Notre Dame got two big commitments this weekend. Both of the kids were on campus this past week. I think the next part of it is now diving into the other players that were on campus this weekend that didn't publicly commit. Yeah. And just the movement that Notre Dame was able to make or not make in one case with players. And I think where we're going to begin, Ryan, is because there was some bit of news that goes with this is one of my favorite receivers in this class, as you very well know, visited this weekend, Micah Gilbert from Charlotte Christian. A couple things about this one, Ryan. Number one, we've said the Carolinas are a very important area for Notre Dame. They've already got one commitment in this class from the Carolinas, Jack Larson, who's from Charlotte Catholic, not Charlotte Christian. Obviously, they're trying to recruit Bryce Young, who is from this high school as well. But They got Micah Gilbert on campus. We've talked about him before. His dad, Mark Gilbert, played in the NFL, correct, I believe. Yep. Was a Division I football player. His older brother played at Duke a few years ago when Duke had a really good secondary.
Also named Mark Gilbert. Yep.
Yep. And then now Micah Gilbert is coming to town. He's a 6'2", 205-pound wide receiver. Ryan, he announced today that he will be making a commitment somewhere on May 2nd. And I do not think it's a coincidence, the timing of that announcement. But Notre Dame, I'm going to steal your phrase, completely knocked it way out of the park for Micah Gilbert this weekend. Who Notre Dame recently, he had announced the top 7 that Notre Dame was a part of, by the way.
Yes. And we know that Notre Dame has been high on Micah Gilbert for some time, months and months and months since that he was offered.
You know who else has been high on Micah Gilbert for a long time?
Brian Driscoll.
That's
Brian
right.
Driscoll. It's Brian Driscoll. So,
love this.
Brian, you mentioned it already, though, right? He's a young man, North Carolina. Notre Dame just got 2 commitments from North Carolina this past cycle, obviously, in Sam Pendleton and Sullivan Absher. Want to continue to really start stockpiling and hitting in the Carolinas more and more. And this is a young man where Notre Dame has been very high on him for some time. And now he's making a commitment, obviously, on May 2nd at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We believe that Notre Dame has obviously put themselves in a great position. I talked to a couple, and I can name drop because they gave me the okay on this, but I talked to Cam Williams. I talked to Carson Hobbs, 2 commits in the 2024 class for Notre Dame, 1 wide receiver, 1 cornerback, who talked a lot about that they really thought that they hit it off with Micah Gilbert. He was a guy that kind of meshed with the other commits on the campus and the recruits on campus just in general during this segment, or during this visit, I should say. And I really think that they really moved the needle with him. A kid that had spoken well of Notre Dame before this, Brian, but this was a kid that we knew Notre Dame was working hard to get him on campus sometime, right?
And they were having trouble with that, Ryan.
Yes.
They were having trouble with getting him on campus. Not that he didn't want to come, but there just were some other schools that were a little bit more of a priority. They were finally able to get him up for the blue gold game. And, the thing that I had been told, this is about a month ago when you and I kind of broke down the board. One of the things that I had been told is that they were very high on him. They weren't quite sure how he felt about them because they weren't able to get him on campus. And you're seeing the film here. He really looks good. But the thing about it, Ryan, was he's a guy that they felt really fit here. And they thought that if they could get him on campus, that they could really they weren't surprised by their ability to get the movement because they really felt like Micah is a great fit at Notre Dame.
Great student.
You just needed to get him. Yeah. Mature kid, comes from a great family, mature family. They understand there's a lot more to this than only playing football, but football is obviously an important piece to this, but there's other things to consider. They felt that if they could get him on campus, that they'd be in great shape because he's just such a great fit for Notre Dame in every aspect of it, including being very talented. I think the one thing that people are going to have a knock on him about, and I understand it, is he's not a burner, right? No. He's not a guy that is going to be take the top off the defense with pure speed all the time. But what I view him, Ryan, is a great compliment. That's why I think his ranking to me is too low. He's ranked 199 by 247, 223 by On3. ESPN and rivals have him as a 4-star, but not in their top 300 by ESPN or 250. And for me, this kid's a no doubt about it top 150 kid. And if he had a little bit more speed, he'd be a top 100 kid. Because here's some things I love about him. Number one, you're seeing in here, he has got tremendous ball skills.
Yes.
He's got very strong hands. He's 6'2", 205, really thick body. He's a guy that to me, if you're like a comp, to me, he's a little bit more athletic version of Jaden Thomas to me, to be honest with you. But he's a little taller, I think, than Jaden Thomas as well. He's a guy that's going to be 215, 220, that's 6'2", with long arms, great ball skills, that can play in the boundary. I mean, that right there, that's just, look at the body control. I don't care about the catch, right? Like, okay, he's beat a high school kid. What I want y'all to look at on that particular catch is look how easily he flips his hips here. Just bam, just flip him around, get his feet down. He's got great body control. He's got excellent focus on the football. He's got, a big body, big frame. He can work himself open. He can win contested catches. But I think he's more athletic than people give him credit for. He's not a fast guy, but he's very athletic, I think, right? He's got very quick feet, great balance, very smooth and fluid. You see how easily he's just getting in and out of that break right there. Like, that's smooth, man.
I was going to say smooth is the word that I think of when I kind of phrase it to Micah Gilbert. He is a really smooth, big, strong receiver. Like, that's what he is. And someone commented on the chat earlier, Brian, or maybe it was on the message board, I can't remember. This kid's hands are about as good as you're going to find in the 2024 class as well, man. Like, he consistently extends and plucks. Like, he has incredible hand-eye coordination and really strong hands for his position.
Somebody just compared him to CJ Williams, and I think that's fair. I think except Mike is about 20 pounds bigger than CJ was, and he's about an inch taller.
Yeah.
But yes, similar skill set. But yes, his ball skills are outstanding. I mean, he's just that guy that, he brings a lot of some of the stuff that Jaden Greathouse brought to the table in last year's class. He may not be the guy that averages 20 yards a catch every week, but he's the guy that's going to catch 8 passes. He's going to be that volume guy. He's going to be that guy on 3rd and 5 that there's just nothing you can do about it. He's just going to box you out. Go ahead, Rye.
I was going to say, I also think of him a little bit, and again, this isn't a comp to this player, just one part of the game that I think is similar to you remember Maurice Stovall, Brian? Like, obviously he was a catch point guy, but you could throw him a now screen out there and he would kind of be physical and bully you a little bit. This kid could do that part of the game too. I think he's a better yak guy than people are going to give him credit for, because he's really physical, man.
And the balance, right? Yeah. And that's why the agility and balance is so important, because he can break off a tackle, right? I mean, he's a strong kid. Like, just, come on, dude. That's just not even fair right there. Here he is playing defense on this particular play. But look, he lacks one trait and one trait only, in my opinion, and that's just burner speed.
Yes.
He's not as fast as Cam Williams. He has great size, good height, great length, really thick frame, great strength, very good athleticism overall. His route running potential is outstanding. I mean, this is a kid that knows how to get open. I mean, he already is an advanced player as a route runner. It's only going to get better as he gets older. He only played 7 games this year because of an injury, right? But he's got everything you want. Great body control, great vision, very high IQ football player, clearly. There's a lot to like about this kid, Ryan. And I'm glad they were able to make the move, because as you've known for a while, I'm very high on this kid. And he complements Cam Williams very well.
That's the biggest thing, too, is that when you're talking about trying to get a complete wide receiver class, if they are able to close on a guy like Micah Gilbert, you can say, Cam Williams is faster than Mike Gilbert. Well, the great thing is that they're going to be together if he commits to Notre Dame, and they're going to be able to complement one another. You could look at it and say Cam is more of that vertical separator, a little more deep, obviously a lot more deep speed, but then Micah could be a complement to him in such big ways.
In 2 ways, Ryan. One is you have one at boundary and one at field. Cam being at field, Micah being the boundary. The other way is to the same side, with Cam outside and Micah inside, doing a lot of the stuff that Jaden Thomas does, in my opinion. And I, like I said, I think he's a little bit taller, and he's a little thicker than Jaden was as a junior, but he's a better athlete than Jaden Thomas was. And Jaden Thomas is a good athlete. But I think the Jaden Thomas comp is it's
interesting.
A really good one, but I think he's just a little bit, like I said, at the same age, just a little bit more athletic than Jaden was, as far as how he fits into this offense. So that's a big one, Ryan. So obviously Notre Dame did a great job there, and they also did a really good job with a teammate of his. Yes. Micah is a teammate of Notre Dame legacy recruit Bryce Young, who Notre Dame is also trying to close out here soon. And that is he was also on campus this weekend, and he has gotten really big. I'm going to find this photo, because remember, he was like a 6'4", 205, 215 pound kid. I just remember when Notre Dame first offered him last summer. And we pulled. I think we did it in the show. We might not have done it in the show, but we pulled a photo up of him with Marcus Freeman, and he was super skinny. And the comment that I made was like, he's skinny now, but look at the feet, look at the shoulders, look at the hands. This kid's going to be huge. You could just tell he was going to fill out. You could tell the DNA was going to kind of carry the day, right? And now you look at him, and you're like, okay, he's like 250 now. And I'm going to show you a picture of him standing next to Kyle Hamilton, who's 6'4",
220
from this week, from the game on Saturday. But Bryce is a kid that Notre Dame is obviously we're familiar with for a long time. But getting him on campus this weekend was important.
This was one of those ones too, Brian, where you're like, Notre Dame has been in such a good position for so long. It's kind of like, what's the holdup here? Like, is this one going to happen type of thing? I will say, just kind of a quick side note,
It's
I was
very
able
fair,
to,
Ryan, by the way.
yeah.
It's very fair.
And I saw Bryce Young in person for the first time because you had told me, like, no, this kid's massive, right? Saw him in person for the first time.
Until this weekend, Ryan, you had only seen pictures of him from from last summer when he was like barely 200 pounds.
Yeah.
I got a chance to see him in January up close in person when he came on the visit with his dad. And I was like, wait till you see this kid. Like, he does not look like the same kid.
I think seeing him next to his dad is the biggest thing too, right? You're like, he towers over Bryant Young, who's a NFL Hall of Famer, by the way.
300 pounds. Yeah, exactly. This is Bryce next to Kyle Hamilton.
Yep.
Who's 6'4" and 220 pounds.
Yes.
Right now, you can't really tell with the jersey on and stuff like that, but he's a good inch at least taller than Kyle Hamilton. So
and
I don't think he's done growing.
Hamilton was a legit 6'4" and 1/8 when he weighed in too, right? So I mean, he's a legit 6'4". We're not saying he's not a 6'3.5" kid that we're rounding up to 6'4". Like Hamilton was a legit 6'4".
Yeah,
so
exactly. So you can see it there, man. That's a big boy. That's a big boy.
And I mean, it's just it was a great setting for it too, Brian, because obviously for people that were at the game or watched on TV, I know they talked about it on TV as well. They kind of honored Bryant Young during the game as well, which was a really cool scene. It was really dope. I think that was a great opportunity for him, obviously, to be around the other Notre Dame alumni, around the other recruits on campus. And this is one where I'm just like, I think that it's ultimately going to be Notre Dame whenever it happens. It's just like,
well,
what's going to happen?
I think the big takeaway from this weekend was I feel a lot better about the chances of this not dragging into the summer. It's still not a given, but I feel a lot better about the chances of this not dragging into the summer. Now, they got to still continue to close because part of me wonders if in the back of his mind he's not partly like Emmett Mosley. The staff is dropping the ball with Emmett Mosley. Not really. They've tried. I just think Emmett wants to kind of do his own thing, which is fine. I mean, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think we're seeing that more and more nowadays too, of like Legacy's kind of doing something else, which nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it at all.
But maybe there's that. But I feel like, especially after this weekend, I feel very good about where Notre Dame is. I feel a lot. I'll say this, Ryan, and we'll leave it here before we move on to the next kid. I feel a whole lot better about where they are with Bryce Young now than I did a week ago. A whole lot better.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
At this point, I'll be a little surprised if it goes into the summer at this point in time. I'll be a little surprised. Let's move on to the next one, Ryan. This was a big one. Notre Dame had a chance to host, finally got a chance to host again, Kingston Viliama Asa from St. John Bosco out in Bellflower, California, the top linebacker on the board.
Yes.
Ryan, you've got a chance to get to know Kingston really well. You got a chance to sit down with him face to face this weekend as well. This was one of the most important visits of the weekend because Notre Dame is in a dogfight. He had mentioned to you in an article, it's Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Tennessee are basically the three schools that are Notre Dame's battling for. Notre Dame needed to have a big needle moving visit with Kingston, Ryan. So my question to you, were they able to do that?
I really think they did. Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned, Brian, he already has 3 official visits set up. One is to Ohio State, one is to Notre Dame from June 16th to the 19th, and the other one is to USC, obviously, which is in the backyard type of thing, right? So Ohio State, USC, and Notre Dame are the 3 teams that Kingston.
I'm sorry. I thought he said Tennessee. I'm sorry. I thought you wrote Tennessee. That's my bad.
No worries at all. Yeah. So Ohio State, USC, Notre Dame are the 3 teams that he's really focusing on from the official visits that we'll see in June of him taking. This was a really important one for Kingston because he hadn't been back on campus since last Blue Gold game. So a year ago was the last time he was on campus at Notre Dame. We know, and he's been on Irish Breakdown podcast before. We've heard from him literally on the show that he's been very high on Notre Dame. And because there's some areas, I think, Brian, that really attract him to Notre Dame, which he continues to really, every time I talk to him, it's the same criteria, which is important. A consistent kid, right? One is high-level football. Sure, that's a given. Other things, though, that really matter most to Kingston is relationships with the staff and people behind the scenes in these programs. That matters extremely high magnitude for a guy like Kingston Viliamu-Asa. And the other thing, Brian, which I think is very good and it plays in the Notre Dame's favor a little bit, is Kingston is very open to his spirituality and his religious
very
backgrounds.
open.
Very open.
Talks about it all the time.
Lot. Yeah. All the time. That's important to him. Notre Dame offers that to him. He talked to me this weekend about some of his favorite parts of the weekend outside of just talking to the coaches and being able to, talk to Al Golden and Max Bulla and all those guys. Al Washington's another guy he has a great relationship with because he was actually recruiting him at Ohio State.
Al's doing a ton of work on this particular, even though he's not a defensive lineman. If they get Kingston, this is one of those ones that it's not a D-line recruit, but Al Washington needs a big
assist on this one. Yes.
Very big assist on this one.
Yeah. But Brian, he talked about two of his favorite things that he saw on campus was one, the grotto. He got to light the candle, he told me I had a moment at the grotto, which was just really special to him. The other thing was he got to see the basilica. He got to walk in. He's like, this was beautiful, man. Like just absolutely beautiful. He loved just kind of seeing those religious entities on campus, those things that we know as Notre Dame fans and people that have been on campus, like the grotto, the basilica. It's a sight to see. It really is. You can't really describe it until you're there. Like you just really can't. And those things matter to a guy like Kingston. It matters. And look, this is where I am with this. USC's in the mix. I think this is a Notre Dame-Ohio State battle. I really do. I think that's the two that are going to be clashing here. He's got great relationships with Ohio State. He's got great relationships with Notre Dame. I really think, though, when you look at the full scope, the religious side, the people side, the school side, the fits, everything, I think that Notre Dame has a really good chance, especially after leaving this visit, because I think that they hit a lot of the criteria he's looking for. But ultimately, I do think it's a Notre Dame-Ohio State battle, and Notre Dame has put himself into a really good position with Kingston following this weekend visit, obviously.
Next, Ryan, I want to move over to another one of my favorite recruits in this class. Obviously, we've seen a little bit of Kingston film here from St. John Bosco. Before we move on to the next kid, that I think that sometimes we can overplay the phrase "must get," right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can overplay that. And look, Will Shipley was a must get until he wasn't, and then you got Audric Estime and Logan Diggs.
Yes.
This is a unique situation because I don't know if there's a plan B here if they don't get Kingston. There's definitely not a plan B that's anywhere on the same level as Kingston.
No.
For a couple of reasons. Number one is they're just not in on a lot of the top linebackers. Number two, it's not a great linebacker class. He's one of the few, to me, no-brainer top 100 kids at linebacker in this class, and there aren't many. He's one of them. That only adds to the need to why he's even more importantly a must-get. And so this is a big one. So that's why I think it was very important to focus on him this weekend. You needed your shot, right? Because he said he was going to commit before
his senior year
in July, right?
Yep.
So you get one more crack at it. But how this visit went was going to set you up for how you were going to be going into those summer or is going to play a big role, I should say, not the NLPL, but it's going to play a big role in where you're going to be when you get into those visits.
Yeah. And again, another kid, and we talked about this last year with like Jaden Greathouses of the world, the Rico Floreses. Brian, you're going after a player that comes from a school that just won a national championship. Like St. John Bosco didn't just win the state championship in California. They were named the national champion for what they did this past year. 13-1. They beat Mater Dei in the playoffs. It was one of the better games of any high school program this past year after they actually lost. The only loss that St. John Bosco had last year was to Mater Dei earlier in the season. Then they beat him in the playoffs. You're going after a kid from one of the premier programs in all of high school football. And to be able to attract him, I think, again, everything about him fits. He's a high academic kid. He's a really talented football player. And he is a very religious young man. He's very spiritual. Like all those things, when you put it together, yeah, I would call it a can't miss. Like you can't miss on a Kingston. He's really that important in this class, in my opinion. And we've talked about linebacker recruiting still has a whole lot of question marks. But one way that those questions could be answered very quickly, Brian, is to get a guy like a Kingston Viliamu-Asa. He is that type of football player, and he comes obviously from a great program out in California, plays high-level football, and he's the unquestioned best football player on that defense that has guys like Peyton Woodyard, Jason Mitchell. And they put players into college football every single year, and there's no questioning how good a guy like Kingston is.
Let's move over to another really important recruit that was on campus this weekend, Ryan, and that is kind of athlete, Isaiah Canion from Warner Robins High School. And I say athlete because he plays corner, he plays some safety, he plays quarterback, he plays wide receiver. Notre Dame likes him as a wide receiver. Love this kid, Ryan. I mean, I remember you and I gave you his name. I was like, hey, this is a guy to keep an eye on. And we're like, never heard of this kid. Look at his rankings. Like, okay. Here we go again, right? I'm kind of joking because that's not usually the reaction that we have. But you pop in the film, you're like, this is a legit kid. Measuring this summer, Ryan, at an event in Georgia, 6'3" and 1/8, 198 pounds, and he ran a 4.51 laser timed. Explain what that means, but then also talk about his weekend, because obviously he's a very important recruit that Notre Dame is really trying to close on, because the big boys are going to be getting on him very soon, and some already are.
Starting to,
and it's important that Notre Dame close the deal before that happens, and that's what they're trying to do. We'll see if they're able to pull it off, but that's what they're trying to do.
I mean, you mentioned it: 6'3" and 1/8, 198 pounds, 4'5", 140. That means, guys, he's long and he's explosive and he's fast. So those things matter, right? We're talking about a high school junior running that type of time at that size. That's really good stuff. A Warner Robins Georgia player as well. You talk about, I mean, because Brian, you're going to watch this film, and everybody out there is going to watch this film. You're going to be like, this kid's playing quarterback. He's playing wide receiver. He's playing cornerback on this particular play. He's also a punter. He's one of the best punters in the state of Georgia as well. This kid does everything for this Warner Robins team. Warner Robins is an important element to this recruitment, in my opinion, though, because who's from Warner Robins as well, Brian? Chancey Stuckey is from Warner Robins. Not the same high school, but he is also a Warner Robins kid. Isaiah has talked to me in the past about the fact that he knows Chancey Stuckey, and he knows people that know Chancey Stuckey. Like there's kind of a connection there instantly. A player that is still developing as a football player, not to a fault of his own, though, because he's a kid that's just been asked to do so many different things for Warner Robins. Like, this is one of those kids that I feel like is really going to blow up the minute he just starts doing one thing on a football field. At this size, this athleticism, a young man that had been on campus, obviously, before at Notre Dame, but this was a chance to really get the full experience this past weekend. Spoke to a couple commits that spent a lot of time with Isaiah. Kind of the immediate feedback is he fit really well with the kids on campus. And he is a very soft-spoken kid, just kind of really polite, kind of off the side a little bit, but his game is loud. His game is extremely loud. Florida State, I know, is one that just offered him recently. There's going to be more teams that are going to be showing more and more interest in an Isaiah Canion. I think Notre Dame is the team to beat in this one, leaving this weekend. And I think that they really put their best foot forward, where I don't know exactly what the timeline is as far as when this one will end, but if it ends anytime soon, I think Notre Dame is going to be in a great position for a guy like Isaiah Canion.
Yeah. Now, just real quick, we'll point out something here that just broke. Not unexpected news. Prince Colley's entered the transfer portal. That is not a shock to anyone. We'll just briefly talk about this one, and then we'll talk about it later. But he is a kid that we knew this, Ryan. Ryan, I told you 2 months ago that
Yes.
Prince was going to transfer. The destination has basically been known for a while. He's going to follow the last linebacker coach, basically. The not the most recent one, but the one that recruited him here.
Yeah,
not a surprise. And he'd been telling people for a while this was going to happen. That's why we didn't see him at practices, and why he's been struggled to stay healthy, number one, but great special teams player that just struggled to really get the defense. I mean, that's just really what it comes down to. Just struggled as a kid that played running back, receiver, and linebacker in high school. Just never could quite get a grasp of it. And he was pushing more to keep the number 2 role than he was to start kind of late in the season. And he knew the writing was kind of on the wall this season that he was going to have to compete with Nolan Ziegler and Jalen Sneed and the freshman linebackers on campus for playing time. And not that he was leaving because he's afraid of competition. I just think he was thinking about that for a while. He had a great relationship with Nick Lazinski and Clark Lee. And I think just that was sort of the final straw for him. So Prince Collie is in the transfer portal, and I fully expect him to end up at Vanderbilt. Now, maybe they can't take him or whatever, who knows? But that's the intention. That's what he's basically been telling people for a while now, is that what he wants to do. So not a surprise. We expect this, and we'll have a lot more on it. But I just want to quickly cover that before we move on to the next one. I want to talk about some big boys next, Ryan. Obviously, a very important recruit in the 2024, and he's becoming increasingly more important. And that is offensive lineman Styles Prescott from Hamilton, Indiana, Hamilton Southeastern High School. It's near the Indianapolis area. He was on campus this weekend as well, Ryan. What's the latest on Styles?
This is another one, Brian. I mean, he's an Indiana kid. He got offered a couple months ago from Notre Dame. He's been on campus a couple times since being offered. I think this is one of those situations where it was actually Harry Heastam was the one that offered Styles Prescott, right? And you're just kind of waiting for that relationship to be built with a guy like a Joe Rudolph, because we know that Notre Dame has been very high on a guy like a Styles Prescott. By all indications, everything went really well this past weekend. And this is another one where Notre Dame, I believe, is the leader here. And if it ends anytime soon, I believe that Notre Dame would be ultimately the destination. This is just another one of those, though, where you're like, he's an Indiana kid. He knows the Notre Dame brand. He's been on campus a couple of times. When exactly is it going to end? If it ends anytime soon, again, feel really good about Notre Dame's chances to close on this one and to finish this one out. And by all indication, everything went great this weekend. I heard from a couple commits on campus that talked about, he seemed to fit with everyone, right? Like the personalities meshed, and a guy like a Styles Prescott obviously has a good visit to Notre Dame this weekend. And just the question is, when does it end? Because if it ends anytime soon, Notre Dame is in a very good position to land a guy like him.
Let's talk about why this is such an important, Ryan, by the way, I'm trying to work on this article about Collie, so just keep that in mind as your abrupt ends. You're fine, man. I'm just giving you a hard time. But just kind of explain why. I mean, Ryan, this is a very important recruitment for a lot of reasons, and it comes down to the class that he's in, and just the uncertainty of other guys at a position that isn't. I think the spring game showed, Ryan, tackle behind Alt and Fisher is Emil Wagner, and I'm not sure what else.
Yes.
Maybe Charles Jagasaw could be that guy. I hope he is. I mean, unless they need him a guard, I think he could be a really good tackle, but it gets a little bit shaky after that because Tosh Baker hasn't improved. Michael Carmody's not a tackle. Tai Chan got hurt again. It's a little shaky after that.
Yeah, no, it really is. This is one of those situations, and Caleb Johnson obviously transferred this offseason as well, a guy that just wasn't in the plans for Notre Dame moving forward. And we've talked about 2024 recruiting, because if you flash back real quick to 2023 for a second, Charles Jagasaw's a guy that I think is going to play offensive tackle at a high level at Notre Dame. After that, though, you struggle a little bit to find a true tackle in the 2023 class. Like, we know that by all indications, Sullivan Absher is going to have an opportunity to play offensive tackle. And I will say this, Brian, I don't know if you saw pictures of Sullivan from this past weekend. Looks a little thinned out, man. It looked like he was in really good shape. So I'm excited for Sullivan to get on campus because he'll be here in June, obviously. But he's a guy that I think is most likely an interior offensive lineman when all is said and done. I think he's a guard. We know that Joe Otting is going to be a center and an interior offensive lineman for Notre Dame. Sam Pendleton is going to be an interior offensive lineman. And Christopher Terrick's also a guy that projects best inside at offense on the interior. So we look at that and you say, Notre Dame may have only gotten one true offensive tackle in the 2023 class in Charles Jagasaw. So fast forward to 2024, right now, how you're sitting is you have a guy in Peter Jones who, again, could he play right tackle? It's possible, but he's most likely an interior offensive lineman when all is said and done. Anthony Knapp is another player that could he play some offensive tackle? Possible, but he looks like, to me, more of an interior offensive lineman. That's what he appears to me. So these last two spots for Notre Dame on the offensive line, it's paramount you get a couple offensive tackles in this class right now. Styles Prescott, there's obviously some things to work on. He's a high school junior, like it's every other high school junior in the world. But he's a player at 6'6", 270 pounds with good length. I don't think there's a question of whether he can play offensive tackle or not. He can. So him, obviously with Gerby Lambert's on the board as well, getting a couple of these offensive tackle types into the 2024 class for Notre Dame is paramount because you haven't recruited enough of these true offensive tackles the last 2 cycles. You need to get a guy like a Styles Prescott who is a true offensive tackle because you really need to start filling a need because you lack offensive tackles on this roster outside of Blake Fisher and Joe Alt right now.
Brian, I look at this one too, and I mean, you and I both got a chance to see Anthony Knapp this weekend. We were told he has 34-inch arms. I didn't. He masks it well. He masks it well, but he's an interior. I think he's probably more of an interior guy.
I liked how he looked physically, but yeah, I mean, I texted you and I'm just like, I don't know if that's 34-inch arms, man. Like, I'm pretty good at that type of stuff, man. I'm pretty good at like identifying length, especially in person. I don't know if that's 34-inch arms, man. I'm just not sure about that.
So let's move on. This next one, Ryan, I want to talk about is really a big one because one of the guys that coming into the weekend, we did not feel great about were like a lot of these guys we've talked about, Bryce Young, Styles Prescott, Isaiah Canion. We felt Notre Dame was the leader for. We felt really good about, they were at least in the mix for Micah Gilbert. We felt they were like at the very least co-leaders for Kingston.
Yes.
The guy that we did not feel Notre Dame was in a great position about coming into the weekend, in all honesty, is Pennsylvania defensive end Malachi Williams.
Yes.
So I want to first talk about the updated as a recruitment, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what we saw physically from him on this weekend, which was very encouraging. But I think this is one, Ryan, where I want you to tell the people kind of what you've been able to gather this weekend, because I think this is one where I would argue that this is the one this weekend almost set you off with this, Ryan.
Yeah.
There's no recruit that they made a bigger difference with from where they were to where they are now this weekend than Malachi Williams.
Yeah, because before this, and I've been fully transparent with this, I just didn't think there was a ton of interest there. I really didn't. But there was an urge from his family and from his coaches to get up to Notre Dame to kind of see everything. There was. I was able to meet his mom briefly this weekend. I was able to talk to his coach for a decent amount of time. And this is kind of everything I'm gathering, Brian. One, he got off to a late start in this trip because there was a little bit of a travel issue to begin this trip. So he didn't get in Notre Dame until Friday night at like 11 at night. So obviously he missed some time to be able to meet with coaches that night and recruits and do all that great stuff, right? But the thing that really gives me optimistic, just talking to him for a few minutes, being able to see kind of the impact Notre Dame had on him this weekend. One, he's got some allies that are pro Notre Dame, in my opinion. His coach is very, pro Notre Dame in that sense. His mom is very open to him, obviously, exploring options like this. I loved meeting his mom, Brian, because she's like one of those mothers that's like, I'm going to guide you and help you in any way you want, but this is your decision, right? Like ultimately, I love those types of parents because there's obviously a guiding light, but it's also needs to make his own decision, right, at the end of the day. And I love that. So there's a couple allies to Notre Dame in this one, I believe, which is good. And let's be full transparent here. Notre Dame has made this kid feel like a priority very, very quickly. Talked a lot about the conversation just with Al Washington, Al Golden, and how much that they made him feel like they needed him in this class as a Viper. They made him feel that, like a priority. So this is one of those situations, and I heard through the grapevine in this one from a couple sources close to him, that there is a very good chance that Malachi Williams will return to Notre Dame on an official visit. So they moved the needle this weekend. They really showcased just kind of everything around Notre Dame football and being a student athlete at Notre Dame and what it can provide. And honestly, I still don't really think that Malachi has a leader in any sense. He's been down to Texas A&M. He's been all over the place as far as some schools that he's seeing. But Notre Dame made an impact here, Brian. And if they get him back for an official, which I think has a decent chance of happening, then I think Notre Dame has a outside shot here, man. I really do think that they have a chance to get a guy like a Malachi Williams who fits a major need for Notre Dame. You want to talk about a true Viper? There's no question of what position this kid's going to play. This kid is a 6'4 plus, long. I mean, I we'll talk about the physical stuff in a second, but I really think that they pushed the needle here tremendously, Brian. And if they're able to get a visit from him this, in June, I think that Notre Dame has an outside chance of landing a guy like a Malachi Williams, because I think that there was like hesitancy to begin with, but intrigue quickly turned into interest this weekend for me.
Now, the key for them, Ryan, is going to be, okay, what do you do next? How do you build on this, right? Because we've seen before kids coming on visits and they love it and everything goes great, but then the follow-up you're just not able to click the same way on the follow-up, and you lose all your momentum. So it's going to be very important that the Notre Dame staff really work hard to build on this momentum and make sure that they don't lose it and get him back for an official, because you're not going to get him in the class most likely because of this visit. Now, maybe you do, but it's going to be tougher in order to do that. And we'll talk, by the way, we'll talking about the Prince Collie thing. We'll talk a little bit more about that after all the recruiting updates. So we're not going to just say what we said and move on. We'll talk a little bit more about it after those. But I think it was important, Ryan. I mean, because you've got two, in my opinion. Now they're different types, right? I think right now Elijah Rushing is more polished. He's bigger. He's just ahead and over. But as you and I have said, I don't know if there's that many ends in the country at all that have a higher ceiling than Malachi.
I mean, think so, man.
He's raw, but he is, to me, if every kid in this class, and I'm talking about the entire nation, maxes out their potential, this is one of those kids that has, in my opinion, top 15 NFL draft pick talent. Now, he also is the kind of kid that could never play a meaningful down because he doesn't figure it out or doesn't get big enough. But I'm just telling you, if this kid develops the way that I think he's capable of, and some of the things I heard from you about his attitude and his personality and all that stuff only raises the bar for me and what my expectations are. Because I don't know the kid, right? I only know what I see on film and things. But the things I heard this weekend about him and from other folks about, just the type of young man he is, it's like, okay, yep, checks that box too. But man, this kid's got tremendous talent. And here's an important thing, Ryan. You sent me a picture of him that you took, and then my wife sent me a picture that she took. And I'm going to try to pull that picture up. This kid is as long of a player as I have seen in person, Ryan, some freaky long kids in Notre Dame. Isaiah Foskey was very long, but Adetokunbo Ogundeji and Khalid Kareem were insanely long athletes.
35-inch arm guys.
This kid seems to be every bit as long as those guys. I mean, it is nuts. I mean, Josh Burnham's got crazy length, but this kid's just got really crazy length. I'm gonna pull this photo up that you sent me, and I'm gonna you sent me this. Didn't you take this photo? Ryan?
Where he's excited.
Okay.
Yeah. Show off the wingspan.
I'm gonna bring this up. Look at this. Look at that. That is crazy length. The other thing that I noticed too, Ryan, is he's a lot thicker now than he was in the fall. And I think you said he measured in a lot bigger than you and I expect, because we were expecting him to be barely over 200 pounds, like maybe 210 at the most. Right?
Yes. Yep. Well, and that's a great note to lead off of is, one, there are some sites that list him at 6'5", and there's others that list him at 6'3". I saw him walk up. I'm like, that ain't no 6'3", man. So he measured in, I think a hair under 6'5", and he's still growing. The great part too, Brian, is a small note. He's still only 16 years old, man. He's a young kid for his age as well. So he could very well continue to grow.
He's young for his grade.
He's young for his age. He's also young for his age.
I have said that before. Like, I don't know.
He's young for his grade. For a junior in high school, he's only 16 years old. Obviously, at the end of the school year here as well. So he's only 16, right around 6'5". I don't know what the arm length is exactly, but that's one of the longest dudes I have seen in person in my life. Like, he's incredibly long. And I'll say this too, Brian. We expected 210, somewhere around there, maybe a little less. Weighed in at 228 pounds, and the goal is, from the coach, told me this directly, they want him to be around 240 pounds this season, like leading up to his senior season. So he's a lot thicker than we thought, a lot bigger than we thought as far as the weight perspective, and he's as long as I thought he was on film, man. I mean, it doesn't take long to watch that film and be like, that dude is dumb long. Like, it's just playing outside his frame, being able to sprawl and show that tackle radius. It's absurd, man. So seeing that guy physically, again, I think we use the can't miss thing too often, especially for a kid that, like, it's not can't miss because you're just getting into a good position with him. But man, seeing that kid, I'm like, Notre Dame needs more of that. They need more of the guys that look like that. That's different, man.
And the film show is impressive too, Ryan. The rawness that we talked about is kind of technical, And obviously the body is pretty raw, but I mean, he's got a really impressive game. He's twitchy, he's athletic. And I mean, he's that kind of guy you and I talk about, Ryan. Like he just looks different and he moves different. And they just need more guys like that.
A lot of Brian Burns in his game, in my opinion.
I remember one. I actually think he's got a lot more thickness potential after what we saw this weekend that Brian Burns does. Yeah. But yes, that's a good one. Yeah. That's a good one. Game-wise, explosiveness-wise, yes.
Brian Burns was like 210, 215 pounds coming out of American Heritage, right? But then he got up to, I think he was like 250 at the combine or somewhere in that ballpark.
It was a pumped up 250. Yeah, it was a pumped up 250. But yes, you are correct. I think this kid has a chance to be a natural 250.
Yeah. Oh no, I think I was talking to his coach, Brian. I think that this kid could be 260 plus pretty quick. Like he's got that type of frame, man. Because he's more foot out than I thought, but there's still a lot of weight that he can put on that frame, man. Like he can put another 30 pounds.
His arms are still skinny. I mean, in that photo, his arms are still pretty skinny. But yeah, he's got really broad shoulders. He's going to be he's a good looking player, man. But the big takeaway, we already knew he was really good. The big takeaway is Notre Dame has made themselves a factor if they can build on what they've seen so far. We're gonna wrap this up a little bit, Ryan. Just kind of get through these next couple really big ones that I think were really important, and then we'll kind of just sort of rapid fire mode go through the rest of them.
Yep.
They had really. We should have done this all together. Really, this is my mistake for not doing them in the proper order. But I wanted to do all three linebackers together.
Sure.
And we obviously talked about Kingston, but I wanted to do Bodie Cahoon and Chris Cole together with Kingston, like back to back, because if we're talking about sort of a dream scenario for Notre Dame, Ryan, and what is the gap closing class? Like, isn't that what we talked about last week? What's the gap closing class? You and I have said that for Notre Dame to get a gap the gap closing class for Notre Dame right now in 2024, they were all on campus this weekend. I mean, their gap closing class was on campus. It was Kingston, it was Bodie Cahoon, and it was Chris Cole.
Yes.
And I kind of joked on Twitter earlier, and I had to tell people sarcasm because, there's some people on Twitter who have zero ability to pick up
never heard
sarcasm.
Of it. Yeah.
But I said, I think Al Golden and Max Buller are sucking up to me right now. They want me to write good things about them because they're recruiting like 4 linebackers from Virginia, right? I mean, these two plus Aaron Childs, who I don't think they have much of a shot with, but they're still recruiting him. And then also you've got the Brett Clatterball kid in the 25 class from Virginia.
Yes. Yep.
But, these are 2 really important kids, in my opinion. And one is more of a in closing mode, and the other one is you got to push yourself into ball game with a good visit. Yep. So we'll talk about those 2, and let's begin with Bodie Cahoon, Ryan, because this is a kid that obviously Notre Dame has been very high on Bodie and Kingston. I mean, those are the 2 inside guys. If you want to talk about who the 2 inside guys that are on the board, and I'm going to say something else, and some people may view this as sour grapes, and it's not, because I like Peyton Pierce more than most actually as a college player, but I don't think Notre Dame pushed as hard for Peyton Pierce once James Laurinaitis left as James did. I think James Laurinaitis liked Peyton Pierce a lot more than maybe some of the other coaches on the Notre Dame staff. And I think that Bodie Cahoon is a guy that you and I have heard for a while that this staff likes a lot.
Yep.
And so they've been in a good position, but Tennessee, North Carolina, other schools are in competition. You have said, Ryan, that he has told you that this is going to be a summer decision after officials.
Yes.
After this weekend's visit, Ryan, is that going to be this? Or is the story still the same?
It's changed a little bit. It has. I asked for kind of an updated timeline from Bodie, and it had been consistent up until this point, Brian. Like, he wanted to get something figured out by June, right? Which tells you, May is probably the decision-making mode, right? Which is right around the corner. But that still gives you a whole month to kind of figure this thing out. And because he's a former lacrosse commit to the University of Ohio, from Ohio State University, but a person that is obviously now open to other possibilities. And kind of where we are now is with the timeline stuff. I asked him about the timeline, and it's kind of, I'm evaluating that with my parents right now. And typically that means things are probably getting pushed up a little bit, right? And if things are getting pushed up, you have to like Notre Dame's.
They're at least considering pushing them up.
Yes,
that's the thing. They're at least considering that, and that's important.
Timeline could be changing in this one, which I think is something to keep a very close eye on. Again, he's been to Notre Dame twice in the last 30 days, right? Not the same month, but late in May, obviously, now in April. And I think that Notre Dame is in a very good spot with a guy like a Bodie Cahoon.
Yeah.
If this was one that pops soon, they'll be hard to beat. But again, he's reevaluated his timeline, and we will see if he pushes anything up or if he stays true to the by June conversation that he's been talking about. But another really good visit for Bodie Cahoon.
I've come around on him quite a bit in the last month, Ryan. I and I think part of it's just an overall frustration with the board. But when I really studied and broke down his film, there's a lot to like there with Bodie Cahoon, especially as I learned about, kind of his background and football not being his top priority for a while. You start to see like, okay, there's something there you can work with. And so he's a guy that I like. Now, all I've ever said is you can't bring him and Cole Sullivan in the same class. That's my only issue there. But I like this kid, and especially if you can partner him with Kingston and a guy like Chris Cole. This is a good football player. I think the big thing for me is I undersold his movement a little bit early. Yep. And then as I dove in a little bit more film, you say, okay, yeah, this kid's got some. And I'm trying to think. Somebody told me there's some lacrosse film out there. But I know Brandon Plesner's really down on him, and I don't see what Brandon. I
think the closing speed's really good for his size, man.
Yeah.
I think the closing speed's really good. I don't know. I guess
I definitely see more than Brandon sees. Now, is this a top 100 kid? No, he's not. But this is a good football player. It's a good football player and a good athlete and a guy that has some inside versus could play Mike and Will. I like him more as a Mike, to be honest with you. I think the movement skills are better for the Mike, but he could play Will. But he's a pretty long kid. That's one thing I saw this weekend too. He's got good length. He's surprisingly good length.
And verified at 6'2", 220 pounds by Notre Dame. So he's got good size for the position as well, to your points.
Yeah, he's a good football player. Now, the other kid that was on campus, and we watched his film last weekend, Ryan, and I'm a huge fan of his upside, and that's Chris Cole. Obviously, he's a kid that right now Notre Dame is in the phase right now, Ryan, where he likes them enough to visit, but it's more about you need to really move the needle in the visit if you're going to come out of it as still a contender. So my question is, Ryan, you had a chance to talk with Chris, I believe, or at least people around him. Was Notre Dame able to move the needle enough to where they're going to come out of this visit still a major player in his recruitment or not?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I got to stand next to Chris Cole over the weekend, Brian, and this kid is another one of those dudes that you're like, wow, this dude is long, man. Salem, Virginia, high school, 6'3", 210 pounds, and he is every bit of that 6'3", and he's super long, man. Very, very impressive athlete on the hoof. And to answer your question, Brian, yes, I think that Notre Dame definitely moved the needle this weekend. Another one where he hasn't been on the board that long was a player that actually visited Notre Dame last year for a camp, said that Notre Dame has kept in constant contact with him over the last few months, finally offered him a couple months ago, and he's quickly became a high priority for Notre Dame at the rover position. I think he's a guy that could start at rover, but eventually could even be a will linebacker at the next level because he's got a really nice frame, really good athlete. Went there with, I believe it was his mom and his grandmother were the ones that took the visit with him. He was there with two ladies. And again, man, kind of coming out of the visit, he basically told me, and I have this in an article out there at irishbreakdown.com, that he is interested in potentially coming back to Notre Dame for an official visit. So obviously, Notre Dame moved the needle enough during this visit to make that a possibility that's on the table. Now, there's a lot of suitors for a Chris Cole. He's been offered by several SEC schools, several ACC schools, several Big Ten schools. The offer list is impressive, even though he's a 3-star recruit apparently, but that's another conversation for another day. Yeah, Georgia and Alabama and all these dudes just offered 3 stars every single day. Sure. But
Notre Dame goes out to Salem, Virginia for average special teams players all the time. Right?
Yes. I mean, but I think they really did move the needle, Brian. If they're able to, it's similar to Malachi Williams. I think that they moved the needle and they made Notre Dame a legit contender here, a possibility for him. The question I have, if you get him back for an official, I think this thing's real, right? You have to get him back for an official. He's talking about it, but until that's set up, I'm not going to sit here and predict him to Notre Dame, obviously, but I think Notre Dame put him in a position where if you get him back for an official, they can make a move with a kid like Chris Cole. Yeah.
And now it's going to be interesting to see how many officials he does take because of the new rule. It's a little different deal, but I don't really care as long as he just comes back. I think that's going to be the key. You're going to have to get him back again. He's going to have to get back for another visit, obviously, at this point in time, if you're going to close. But it's good to hear that they definitely made a move on him. So that's obviously important. Ryan, we're going to quickly kind of wrap up these last two 24 kids. We're going to cover the 25 stuff here in the next couple of days because we went very long on this, and I do want to talk a little bit about the Prince Colley situation. So let's just kind of last couple guys. Oliver Miles, real quick, Ryan. You had a chance to talk to him.
Yep, he is an athlete out of the state of Texas. Notre Dame is recruiting him as a safety. He talked a lot about the staff, really gave him great vibes as far as really liking his ability to have range of the back end and to be a little bit versatile with how he can potentially play at the safety position. Told me just point blank, Notre Dame's one of my top schools, right near the top of the list. That one, I think, is a question of how hard is Notre Dame going to push, and what does the safety board ultimately look like? Because I think
I don't know the answer to that, Ryan. I have no clue. I have no clue. I mean, a month ago, we're hearing Jalen McLean's basically, a really good position for him.
Yep.
And now it's like they're not really in it anymore with him, And then DeJuan Lane, he's just not, he's just not real responsive to Notre Dame. And then all of a sudden, boom, DeJuan Lane's on campus.
Yes.
Things go great with Trinity, with Kennedy Urlacher, and it looks good there. And I still think it is, but now all of a sudden he's going to TCU, he's going here, he's going there. And it's just kind of like, I don't know what's going on at safety right now.
It's a little weird.
Did you get a chance to talk to Davis Andrews much? That's a guy that I
just very briefly. I'll have more on him
that's why
later.
we don't have much on him just yet. We'll have that on the board later because we don't want to give an update until we have more. And then the other one, Ryan, I'll just briefly give this one. TJ Lindsey is a guy that came on the visit. I'll just leave it here, Ryan. Based on some recent commitments and movement with other D-line recruits, I don't think that Notre Dame is going to make TJ Lindsey the priority that he was before. And that was the vibe that you got from talking to him as well. So I think that's one that I think in the end, unless things change quickly, I don't see that one going anywhere moving forward. So I believe that wraps up the 24 kids, Ryan. You're going to try to get a hold of Davis Andrews, who you've talked to a lot in the past. We just haven't gotten a whole lot up from yet from the visit. So we'll try to have more. But I just definitely think a good chunk of the guys on campus this weekend. I feel Notre Dame is the leader for right now. We'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 kids that came out of this visit. They're the leader, at least 5. And I would say they're the co-leader for at least 2 more. Yeah. In my opinion. And so that's where I want to be. Justin Denson was on campus. He's not a guy right now that I think the staff is prioritizing as
I talked to him briefly. I think that his options are kind of still open for a lot of different avenues as well. So,
So I don't know if that's a guy that they're going to necessarily make a big push for. And we don't have anything on Grant Bricks. Did Grant Bricks visit this weekend?
That's news to me if he did, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. I didn't see him if he did. So actually, let me just check on something real quick. But anyway, so that's going to do it for that, Ryan. That's kind of the recruiting roundup.
Yep.
At this point in time, obviously, there's a lot of good movement, a lot of good results from Notre Dame. It's an important weekend, and I think a weekend where Notre Dame was able to really kind of get some much needed movement with some guys that we were unsure of, and hopefully they put themselves a lot closer to closing with a couple other guys. So I think that was very important. So I think overall, I mean, obviously not every weekend is great, but overall, very strong weekend for Notre Dame. Very strong weekend for Notre Dame. Now it's about closing. That's going to be the key. Yep. So, Ryan, let's move on to this Prince Colley situation. Obviously, we talked a little bit about it earlier. I want to just address it now. This should not be a shock to anyone that is – it's definitely not a surprise to anyone on the message board, and it should be a shock to anyone that listens to this show. We have hinted about this for a while. What I've said on the message board, all I've said is this. There's a reason we don't talk about Prince Colley. There's a reason we don't ever say – when we talk about linebacker next year, there's a reason I never mention Prince Colley unless somebody asks about him. Yeah. Because this has been known for a while. There's a reason he wasn't at the practices that we saw. There, and they say injuries and all. I'm sure he had some injuries, but like this was never going to be. Like, he started off in spring ball. I was told, Ryan, what would you say about a month before spring ball started? I told you, I was like, yeah, he's leaving. And how I knew that is he was telling all of his teammates that he was leaving. he was going to transfer to Vanderbilt. That's what he's telling his teammates.
I was very surprised that he went through a lot of spring ball in general.
He didn't go through much of spring ball. He was hurt early. He was hurt early in spring ball.
Gotcha.
So, I'm not, this isn't a surprise. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And it would be easy to say, oh, he's getting pushed by younger players. And he was. I mean, that was part of it. Similar to Lorenzo Styles. Yeah, he had battled some injuries, but I think a lot of it was, I just don't know that Prince ever connected with the current staff
right
the way he did the previous staff. He was very close with Nick Lazinski, very close with Clark Lee during the recruitment process. And I just don't know that that he ever felt like he got a shot at Notre Dame. No, I think he did. Look, Prince did some nice things in limited minutes last year as a linebacker, but he just wasn't a guy that to me showed me. He started to show it a little bit late in this first year, a little bit, but he just never took that jump from an instinctive standpoint. And he's small. He was down about 210 pounds last year. So I just don't know if Prince was ever going to be a factor linebacker.
Yeah.
Now, here's where this is a miss or a loss. This is a big loss on special teams. Prince was a very good special teams player. Obviously, he had the scoop and score, well, I guess the catch and score against Clemson last year, but he also blocked a kick against Stanford. He was a very good special teams player. Now, the good news is Notre Dame has a mess of freshman and sophomore linebackers, every bit as talented as he is, but bigger. So I think they're going to be okay. It's a loss because, Ryan, it's like this, man. This is what drives me nuts sometimes. Well, it's fine. They've got this guy. And I'm like, yes, that's true. But wouldn't you rather have that guy, and Prince Collins? I mean, that's my whole thing is like, so it's like to dismiss it as if it's nothing because, if the light ever went on, Prince has got a chance to be able to help you in some areas. But it's just one of those things. My point, however, is I do believe they're at least in a position where this isn't going to sting. As long as they don't go through a rash of injuries, this isn't going to sting. The freshman and sophomore linebackers have looked phenomenal this spring, and they've taken every bit of advantage of him being out. Yep. And honestly, he was going to, even if he was healthy and stayed this spring and was completely bought in, he was going to have a hard time holding off Nolan Ziegler and Jalen Sneed. He was. That's just a fact. Because they're just more natural football players. Nolan's a much more natural football player, and Jalen's more explosive than Prince is.
Yep.
I
mean, if you saw the blue gold game too, I mean, it's hard not to get excited about what you saw from Jay Nosbury and Drake Bowen, and even Preston Zinter was balling in that game, man. He had a couple really nice plays.
And he had a rough spring. I mean, he did not have a great spring, but he ended the spring very well.
Yes.
Because he wasn't thinking. He was just running.
He was just going, man. Just going. Yep.
And he looked good, man. So you're like, look, there's 3 freshman linebackers that have a chance to be. I said this in my post-game breakdown. Every one of those freshmen and sophomores, to me, look like a guy that can start and play for Notre Dame.
Yes.
Agreed. Not just be, that guy's a good rotation player. Just start and be a player. Jaden Osbury is a dude. Drake Bowen is a dude. Preston Zinter showed me some really good things in the game. And Nolan Ziegler and Jalen Sneed, we've already talked a ton about. So you don't ever want to lose a talented athlete. And from everything I've ever heard about Prince, he's a good kid. Good. Players like him and all that. I just don't know if the fit was ever as good for him as it as he wanted it to be, because he came in that transition where Brian Kelly leaves and Prince is a freshman and then new defensive staff comes in and the guys that recruited him to Notre Dame aren't here anymore, and especially Nick Lazinski, who was a great recruiter for Notre Dame as a linebackers coach, linebacker GA. Kids loved Nick Lazinski. I just think, and sometimes it just happens. Look, everybody's always looking to blame when kids transfer. In today's era, especially, sometimes it's just we did anything wrong. Just this kid just decided another place was better for him. And I think in this particular instance, that's the case. I've never, like some of the things I've heard about Lorenzo Styles, you're like, boy, yikes, that kid's you're going to be better off, right? Yeah. And with Prince, I've never heard anything like that. I mean, teammates liked him, got along well with him. I don't think there was bad attitude problems. I just don't know if he was ever super comfortable here. And then I think the injuries kind of hurt too. And now I think he'll go closer to home and play for coaches that he has a much longer relationship with. So I wish him all the best. I like Prince. I hope he can stay healthy if he goes to Vandy. I hope he can stay healthy and has a chance to fit and play really well there. I really do.
He's really talented kid, man.
Yeah,
Really
very talented
kid.
athlete for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I've never heard anything bad about him as a young man either. I have nothing but good things about him. So I'm hoping he can go there and it works out for him. There's no doubt about that. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that one a little bit and address that before we dive into the mailbag. So, again, I'm not happy that Prince is gone at all, but they're going to be fine. And that's not a shot at Prince. It's just you're in this is where you want to be as a program. And it's more about the health of the depth chart than it is when I say they're going to be fine without that guy. He wasn't, that's not what I'm saying at all. Yeah. It's just that if you're going to lose a guy, this is a position where you're in a good place to lose him because of just so much young talent that's coming down the pike. And now they're going to get even more reps because they don't have to worry about splitting reps with him at any of those positions. So they'll be okay. They'll be okay. Just like if they happen to lose a guy at running back, they're going to be fine.
Yes, they will.
They're going to be fine. Safety, not so much.
Yes.
Offensive tackle, not so much.
And you want to get a point with the talent acquisition and development perspective that pretty much every spot you'd be like, you can maintain this, right? It's like if you're losing a Bear Alexander doesn't hurt that much for a Georgia team, right? Like that's where you want to get. And Notre Dame's obviously isn't there at every single position, but to your point, Brian, linebacker is one where you can weather that storm a little bit because you have recruited at such a high level at that position.
Absolutely. So, Ryan, that wraps up this portion of the show. Obviously, we're going to have a mailbag coming up next. We do have a lot of questions that we'll get to here, but I want to thank everybody for being with us so far. Hit that like button, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Don't go anywhere because we're about to get in the mailbag, and there's some really good questions about a lot of these topics. You can throw in more questions now if you want to get to it, but we're going to get to that next, Ryan. But, hey, I want to remind y'all, if you want to listen to the Lucky Lefty podcast on the podcast app, if you want to listen to CFP All-America, if you want to listen to a lot of the things that we're doing, that we're going to be doing here on CFP Nation, I'm going to have a show here, a college football show on CFP Nation at some point in time soon. We are talking about, we're working on the details out, but we're talking about possibly having a live show for the draft on Thursday night. We're still working on the details. That will be on CFP Nation on the YouTube channel. So you're definitely want to subscribe to CFP Nation on the YouTube channel. And then, of course, on that platform apps, you can find it. If you type in CFP Nation Blue Wire, you can find it that way. You can also find it on your Apple Podcasts and Spotify podcasts as well. Let's dive into the mailbag, Mr. Roberts, and we're going to get started off here. A lot of good questions. And if you guys have some more, obviously throw those in there. But we did have a super chat that I wanted to start off with from Insured by Big, one of our resident LSU fans.
And the question is, y'all have always been gracious on responding to my LSU nonsense. Haha. I know it's nothing big, but just want to show a small appreciation. God bless. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. That's awesome.
And hey, look, man, like it is something. If somebody takes time out of their day and especially with the way our economy is right now and different things, and you decide you want to give us some money, some of your hard-earned money to help support our show, I always appreciate that. Whether you're a Notre Dame fan or not, we're very appreciative of that. And I mean, we make our business off of people deciding that they want to spend $5 a month for our site and things like that. So we appreciate it. And we appreciate you being on here too, because this is a Notre Dame channel, but I like to pride ourselves on being a little different. You know, we talk football, we talk ball. I'll make known my biases or my dislikes, but then we'll also try to give people credit where credit is due, whether we like them or not. And so I love the fact that we have Ohio State fans and USC fans and Michigan fans and LSU fans and Bama fans and all that stuff. And I want to start getting more and more of you all over on the CFP Nation app. So we're going to start doing some live shows this summer on the CFP Nation channel as well. And hopefully we can continue to grow it that way. So what I would say to you is when we start doing some of those shows, man, go get your boys and bring them with you. All right. And I know that some of them won't act as kind as you did, but trust me, I can handle it pretty well. I can handle LSU.
Only the good LSU fans.
LSU no, you can bring all of them. We can just if they cross the line, just block them. I have no problem doing that. But thank you for the super chat very, very much.
Next question is from Adam Blair. I just watched Micah Gilbert's film, and I was wondering if in any way he reminds y'all of Jaden Greathouse. The dude has got some hands.
There's some similarities there, Ryan. I mean, similar body type, although I think Micah's a little longer than Jaden was. Similar athleticism. Neither of them are burners. Great hands.
Yes.
And that's the thing about Jaden Greathouse. And we saw it this weekend at the Blue Gold game, right? Great hands. So, yes.
He's absurd, man.
I think Micah has a little bit more boundary to his game than Jaden does. But, yes, they're very similar players in a lot of ways. Adam, I think that's a very fair comparison. But I think your observation – was this the response you were referring to earlier, Ryan? But yes.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
yes,
some great hands.
He has and it's not just having great hands requires strong hands, obviously, great hand-eye coordination, obviously, but there's also a level of concentration that, like, I have had guys, Ryan, and I don't know if you've seen this, but I've had kids at camps, especially, never really coached a guy like this, but when I work summer camps, where if you're just in there catching with them, and they look like they're comfortable, really. But then all of a sudden they start running routes and they got to catch the ball when they're moving. And they can't track the ball well. They don't have good body control. If the ball's not like right here, they have such tight hips, they can't move. They can catch the ball great when they're stationary, but they can't track it when they're running. They can't find it over their shoulder.
That's why I love wide receivers that an outfield background in baseball, man.
Yes.
Like ability to track the ball for sure.
Jaden Thomas was a really good baseball player as an outfielder in high school. But yes,
makes sense.
There's a lot more to it: balance, body control, catch radius, strong hands, concentration. And here's the other thing too about the greatest pass catchers. I mean, when I say pass catchers, not wide receivers, but the greatest catchers of the football, they've got some mental fortitude. Yes. Not so much as now as it used to be, but still, because the great ones are guys that can catch it when there's people trying to drill them.
Yes.
And that's what I like about this kid a lot. And we saw some of that from Jaden Greathouse on Saturday as well. Working
through contact and at the catch point is not for everyone, man. It's not for the faint of heart, because you are going to get smacked occasionally. It's going to happen, man.
Yes,
but to your point, Adam, I think that a lot of the things that Brian already hit on that I would just reiterate is some of the similarities I do see that I think are very apt is there's a competitiveness in the air to win the football. I feel like they always feel like the ball is theirs when it's out in the air, right? And then I also think Micah Gilbert's got some chops as a route runner too, which is why I think Jaden Greathouse looks so natural in the slot this spring and during the Blue Gold game, because he just understands body positioning, body movement, getting in and out of breaks. I think Micah Gilbert could also play in the boundary, but I also think that he could be a big slot as well at times, right? Where you're just kind of running routes, winning through contact. I think there's some flexibility as far as positionally those guys can play as well.
Yeah. Let's get to the next one here, Ryan. Sorry, I lost my place. Here we go.
You're good. Question is from Rob Osgood, who says, guys, thank you so much for the greatest show on Saturday. I wasn't a part of it, but you're welcome. Love the game and love the positive things from it.
I don't want to say it's just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence that we had a great show and Ryan wasn't on it. No,
Vince is greater than Ryan. It's all good, man.
Here's the thing, Ryan. No matter how hard you try, there's one thing that you will never be compared to Vince, and he's just an OG. Now, again, to me, you are, because you were writing stuff for the website very early on.
Yes.
But from a podcast standpoint, it's just for a while. There's just me and Vince's ugly mug for a long time. So
it's fair, man. It's fair.
He's an OG and people love the OG. You know what I mean? So
I love it, man.
Still love
it. Rob
just
finished
just
up.
A coincidence, Ryan. I'm saying just a coincidence that you weren't on the show and it was a great show.
If you love me, put a heart in the chat. I would really appreciate it very much.
Ryan's feelings are hurt a little bit right now. So can somebody please tell Ryan they love him?
I need something. Rob did finish up with, I know it's a glorified practice, but what was your impression of Jared Parker and the offense on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm going to bring up another question after that as well. So we had a question from someone else that I got to be honest with you, Ryan, it never ceases to amaze me how many times I watch a game and form opinions, and then somebody asks a question. And I'm not talking about Rob's question. I'm talking about another one.
I saw this
and
one.
I'm thinking, I don't know if we were watching the same game. So I'm gonna pull this one up from Will, and I think this is Will responding to some other things, not so much what he saw, but what he heard. I believe.
Yes.
But I'll read this one too, because these two kind of go together. In my opinion.
Will says, Ryan and Brian, I'm worried about the offensive coordinator hire and don't like the noise coming out of spring camp. I could also see Hartman smoothing over underlying issues with the offensive coordinator hire, giving him another year.
So we'll see what I'll ask you, because you're usually really good about, or you're really good about this, because we've asked you to follow up on things before, and I really appreciate it. Could you explain what you mean by noise? Because I mean, I'm not sure what that means. I don't know if like it was the game or if someone's reporting. I don't listen to other people's shows. I don't read other people's content. I only know what people tell me. So I don't really know what you're referring to as noise. I have heard nothing but good things about the OC hire this spring. And I liked what I saw from the offense on Saturday, especially with the goal team offense with Hartman. And you could say, oh, well, how does Hartman mask a great play call that gets a double post? Again, here's the deal. Notre Dame's defense likes to roll their safeties a lot. You know, one of my favorite concepts against teams that like to roll safeties, Ryan, is double posts. Yeah. Because I'm putting, if I guess right and I get my double post called to the right side, especially teams that roll their field safety, I'm putting your free safety in an incredible bind, running double post to that side.
Yeah.
Because either you roll to the center field and take away the deep post, and now I've got a backside route one-on-one backside. Right. And Notre Dame ran that. I've said this before. That's my favorite pass concept. It was when we called it different things at different places, but the first time I ever ran it when I was at Duquesne, and we ran it a million times that year, man. It was called Dolphins, double posts. And we just destroyed people with it. We'd hit the inside post, the overtop post, the backside post. It was beautiful. And I like that. They run a lot of the sales stuff. I love the RPO stuff coming out of the game on Saturday. I like the tempo, the mixing up the tempos. I mean, for what I like in an offense, I saw a lot of stuff that I liked from the spring game. The stuff on the blue team, there was stuff open.
Yeah.
It just either the line didn't have time or the quarterback was inaccurate or whatever. But and they were very vanilla. I mean, they told us and told me we're not going to show a ton. So I guess I just don't understand. I mean, if some people are literally saying the offensive coordinator was not doing a good job because of the 2 open practices, then I would say that those people don't know what they're talking about.
Yes.
And those people don't know football, because as I said before, if it's April and we're running a 3rd down blitz day, which is what they were doing the last open, it was literally 3rd down blitz the entire time. If the defense doesn't win that scrimmage, your defense sucks. That's football. I've coached it. I've played it. If you're in April, now maybe if you get in the season and I got a veteran team and I'm gonna do some damage on you. But if it's in April or the first 2 weeks of fall camp and your defense isn't dominating or at least winning those days, that means your defense sucks.
Yes.
That's exactly what that means. And so then people that don't know football or never played football are just reporters, right, and haven't been around the game for a long time. So like Tim Priester didn't play football. He's a baseball guy. But Tim's been around the game a long time. He can have a better idea of context, but you get some of these young guys that have never covered a game, that care more about clicks, or they may not care about clicks, they just don't know any better.
Right.
That see this and think, oh, geez, the offense really struggled. And you're like, yeah, I'd hope so, because otherwise that means their defense is going to be hot garbage come the fall. And so I just don't understand what people are looking for. I'm very pleased with what I've seen and what I've heard from people coming out of the offense this spring. Now, are they a finished product? Heck no. But did any of you really expect this offense to be a finished product after Jared Parker had 15 practices, 14 really going into the game? Is that really what your expectation was?
Yeah.
I don't care who I don't care if Andy Ludwig is the offensive coordinator. And everybody knows I loved Andy Ludwig. They are going to have issues that they need to work through as they get through the spring. Everybody does. I watched Ohio State spring game. I watched Michigan spring game. I watched Penn State spring game. I watched Georgia spring game. I watched Alabama spring game. And you know what? They're all defensively ahead of their offense. All of them. But you know what we saw on Saturday? The Gold Team offense was smoking.
Yeah, they were.
It's one of the best offensive Georgia with Carson Beck and Notre Dame with Sam Hartman. Now, I haven't seen Tennessee's yet, and I've heard one of their quarterbacks did well. I haven't seen that one yet. But of all the other springs I've watched, and again, USC, the US, one of the USC's offenses, but I think that was more about their defense sucks. And then Carson Beck's Georgia squad, I can't remember if that was the red or the black, and Notre Dame's gold team were without question the 3 best offenses I've seen this spring, without question. Yep. And so I'm fired up about it. I'm very fired up about it. And if people aren't, then I don't know what you're talking about. And I definitely don't want to listen to somebody who hasn't been at a practice, who's just relying on what other people have told them. If you're doubling down on taking a really hard stance on what Notre Dame is now in the spring, because remember last year I couldn't go to practices, right? So I cater to you, but what people don't know is I was getting sent film, right? I was getting sent stuff from practice, so I could see a lot of what was going on. And I still would say, okay, here's my stance, but I'd give the context of, but I haven't been there.
Right.
So for someone, I don't know who this person is, but I know for a fact this person hasn't been in a practice yet. And so I really don't understand where this is coming from, but it's creating a narrative that I just think is a little bit nonsense, to be completely honest with you, because that's what a spring game is. You could literally take every good thing that happens on one side of the ball and spin it as the other side sucks. That's what spring is. Every time a good play happens by one person, then somebody on that same team is not doing well. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So yeah. I really don't know where this narrative is coming from. And Will, I would be curious to find out what you're referring to. But I've probably gotten 15 DMs and text messages in the last 24 hours about what's being reported by another site. And it just blows my mind.
Off of the blue gold game, they were doing that?
Yeah, in the practices.
Okay.
Because they're carrying what they saw in practices into the blue gold game.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, I really don't get it. It's just crazy to me. It just seems I don't understand how people cannot have excitement based upon some things that we're seeing and hearing as well. I mean, to your point, Brian, I mean, can anybody watch Sam Hartman on Saturday and be like, man, I'm not excited about that? Like, Come on, man. Like, let's be serious here. It'd be one thing if like Sam Hartman was doing like some Caleb Williams stuff. We're like, dude, that guy's just making crazy Superman plays. That's not on the coordinator.
Yeah.
And I said, well, he's just throwing a bunch of curls and hitches. Yeah, that's what most passes are. And then you occasionally hit that deep shot. I mean, who goes out there and throws 43 post routes a game and go routes a game? Yeah. It's about efficiency. If I got a guy banging deep end cuts and post curl routes, as long as hitting option routes on 1st and 10, and you're getting the ball out so quickly that your receivers can go out and make plays after the catch, isn't that exactly what you want a quarterback to do? Guy averaged over 10 yards an attempt in that game. Right?
He was like 13 of 16. Like, it was just incredible efficiency. Efficiency. Yeah.
So it's weird. It's just weird.
I mean, it's okay to point out the bad with the good, obviously. Right.
And
I mean, like Sam Hartman
to the post game show, Ryan. We had plenty of things that got to get better coming out.
Like Sam Hartman threw one, I think, scrambling to his right that was almost intercepted by Ryan Barnes, for instance, right? Like, that was a bad play, but we can't ignore all the good and just focus on purely the bad. I mean, that's just it's kind of weird to me. It's kind of weird. Yeah, so, I mean, if we're being objective, we're going to talk about both sides of it, right? And there's a whole lot more good than bad to focus on.
Very much so. All right, let's get to some more. But again, we'll see 2.0. I still am curious as to what noise you're referring to.
Yeah,
I can only tell you what I saw, and what I saw, I'm not worried at all about the offense right now. Now, does that mean everybody's where they need to be? No. We talked about it in the game. And here's the thing, too. We're going to have some shows coming up next week. We're going to like reevaluate the game and take a deeper dive into where they are at each position. This week, we're going to have some fun shows and stuff like that. But we'll take a deep dive and we'll dive into where I'm feel good right now and what's got to get better. Because again, they're in 15. There's about 40 practices to get ready for the first game.
Yep.
They're 15 in right now. And that doesn't even include the 2 months of summer workouts that are part of it. Right? They're not even, I would say they're barely halfway, not even halfway to the start of the season in this program's development. That has to be considered as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we'll see. All right, let's move on here, Rye.
Next question is from Call Me Ty. Question is, I know Marcus Freeman is recruiting all these kids. Is there a kid you would say he is the lead recruiter in the way that he was for Jalen Sneed? It seems like Sneed was only playing for Notre Dame if Freeman was here. Well, I mean, Marcus Freeman was the defensive coordinator and linebacker coach, though, right? Like, he should be recruiting. He should be the lead recruiter for Jalen Sneed. Just a little bit of context to that conversation. Yeah.
The position coach is always going to have a lot of influence on a guy, and should, because at the end of the day, you're playing for the head coach big picture, but the guy that's interacting with you the most on an everyday basis is your position coach. So is Freeman the lead recruiter in the sense that he was as a position coach? No, he's not.
No.
Is he a lead recruiter from the standpoint of of he is very involved in recruiting and very important to key recruiting. Yes, still very much so. Yes, very much so. So that's still very involved. It's just different. Call me Ty when you're a head coach. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this because I don't want to say he's not the lead recruiter because that's going to come across different than I mean it. I just mean his leading is in a different way now because he's not the position coach anymore. So yeah, Jalen, the next Jalen Sneed may love Marcus Freeman, but he's also got to like the linebackers coach, right? Like Peyton Pierce loved Marcus Freeman, but he's going to play for James Laurinaitis, not Ryan Day and not Marcus Freeman. And that's where it comes down to. So it's just different. And I think Coach Freeman's learning that. He's learning about how important it is to have assistant coaches that are also good recruiters. You can't do it all yourself because at the end of the day, these kids are also good. They need to play for their position coach.
Yep.
So that's that's kind of where I want to see it. All right, so it's good questions.
Very good questions. And the next one is from Tyler Ehrig, who says, was there any recruit on campus this week that prior to the visit, Notre Dame was on the outside looking in, and after the weekend, we took a big jump into their top 3 or 5?
Can I say something real quick, Ryan? And I'll let you answer the one about who they made the biggest movement with. But
sure,
if a kid's paying on his own dime to come to Notre Dame, they're not on the outside looking in. So for example, Chris Cole. If you'd asked me a week ago, are they on the outside looking in? I'd have probably said yes, because he'd never been on campus before. But the minute him and his family spend their own money to come visit, they're no longer on the outside looking in. They're now a contender. Now, are they 1st or 7th on the list? That remains to be seen, but they're in the inside, right? Yep. And so that's what I would say. I mean, Tyler, your question is very fair. I just would somewhat change it to, Ryan, the way I want you to answer is, a kid coming into the visit where Notre Dame, they were in it, but they're just doesn't seem to be like the same kind of fire or passion there is maybe for some other schools. They have a lot of ground to make up on. I think there's 2 kids, Ryan, and I'll let you just talk about them again. And to me, it's Malachi Williams and Chris Cole.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, the 2 guys that looked about as impressive as anybody on campus as well from a physical perspective. I mean, to your point, Brian, Malachi Williams coming into this visit, I didn't think there was pretty much any traction with Notre Dame, to be honest. I mean, there was enough to go on a visit, right? But it wasn't anything where I thought there was substantial interest there for Malachi. Intrigue, perhaps. But after the visit, again, if Notre Dame gets Malachi back for an official visit, I think they're definitely in that top group. I think that they moved the needle tremendously for a guy like Malachi Williams. They did it similarly to Chris Cole. If Chris Cole, again, talking about scheduling a official visit to Notre Dame, they were in a little bit better of position, in my opinion, with Chris Cole than they were with Malachi Williams coming into the visit. But another situation where if they get an official visit from Chris Cole, I think that they'll at least be in that final group when all is said and done. So you look at Malachi, you look at Chris Cole, both very talented football players who there was some semblance of intrigue coming into the visit, but I think they moved after the visit with you are now in a much better position and you are in striking distance if you get official visits from both guys.
Yeah. TB12 for Heisman.
TB12 says, is there any interest in RJ Moten or AJ Henning after entering the portal? They're both Michigan players. Quick note, Brian, quick note. I actually coached against RJ Moten in high school. So there you go. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the New Jersey guy, man.
On him as a player?
He was more of a running back than he was a safety in high school, but I actually think he's a talented athlete, man. Very talented.
Yeah. My only thing, Ryan, is I would have to go back and watch Michigan more, but if I remember correctly, didn't they kind of use him a lot on the second level?
A decent amount. They used him more from depth last year than this year, and he got kind of phased out this year, which was kind of weird. But he actually, I thought he showed a lot of good things in 2021, not as much in 2022.
He's like 220 plus pounds. I mean, he still finished ninth on. Yeah, he still finished ninth on the team in tackles. But I've seen RJ a little bit. I can't sit there and tell you that I've studied his game, and so take this as more of an observation based on just watching Michigan play and seeing him at times, as opposed to, hey, I've studied the kid's film and here's what I think. I'll always go back and do that.
Yeah.
Later. But to me, I see a guy that's more of an alley player I see a guy that's more Isaiah Pryor in how you use him more than Xavier Watts. Right. And now that might not be a great example because Isaiah, he's a little bit more instinctive than Isaiah was. But to me, I don't see a guy that really gives you a whole lot in coverage. I see a guy that's just a pure alley player, and not that there's not some value to that, but I don't think that's their need right now. I think they have plenty of guys who can fill the alleys. I don't know if they have any guys that safety that can cover and show any range. I mean, right? I mean, you're trying to improve upon those guys that can't do that right now. Yeah. I mean, is he improved on DJ Brown as a tackler? Maybe. Is he improved on DJ Brown in coverage? Absolutely not. And so I don't know if the fit there is great, but I'm looking at his stats last year, Ryan, at Michigan, and in 426 snaps last year, he had 10 missed tackles. That's a lot, in my opinion, according to Pro Football Focus.
Wait, how much was it? Say it one more time.
426 snaps. He had 10 missed tackles.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. Well, DJ Brown in 504 snaps had 12. So DJ's missed percentage was 20.7. RJ Moten's was 23.3. That's worse. So I don't know if that necessarily adds something that you need. I'd rather look at like the Cameron Kelly types, like the guys that have a little bit more range and a little bit more coverage ability. And none of these guys that are getting in the portal are great players. And if they are great players, they're not coming to Notre Dame because they're jumping in the portal for NIL deals. But I would look more at those type of guys than an RJ. And not that RJ is not a good football player, right? Look, guys, it's not just about getting a safety. It's about getting a safety that's going to complement your room and getting a safety that's going to give you something that is actually better than what you already have, not just a body. And so I don't know if RJ Moten is the answer. And then AJ Henning, I don't know that AJ Henning helps you a whole lot. I mean, he's shown you some return ability, right? I mean, he's done that. He's a decent punt returner. He had a punt return for a touchdown last year. Decent kick returner, but I want to use the return game as a chance to get Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores and Jadarian Bryce and Jeremiah Love and those guys to football, not AJ Henning. And I don't think AJ Henning cracks the top 5 at receiver for Michigan. For Notre Dame, because he didn't do that at Michigan. Yeah. Right. He had 9 catches for 60 yards last year, 10 catches for 79 yards year before that, and 6 for 59. He doesn't even average 10 yards a catch for his career, I don't believe. So the only reason that you would be excited about AJ Henning is either A, you feel he gives you an upgrade in the return game, or B, you're still living off of his high school ranking. Because he's athletic, but he's just not a great football player, in my opinion. So I don't, with where they are at receiver right now, I don't think that's the kind of guy that I would go get, in my opinion.
I feel like AJ Henning was that guy every single year too that Michigan was hyping up in the preseason of like, it's going to be this year. It's going to be this year.
In their defense, and in fairness to him, he's been banged up a lot. And every time he was getting ready to take that next step, he'd get hurt. You know, that's the big thing for me. Yeah. So, it's an interesting deal, man. Did you see Aaron Rodgers just got traded to the Jets?
So someone just said,
yeah. I just saw it's on ESPN. Just saw that one. I'm trying to see what it was for. It was
the worst kept secret in the world.
The Packers traded they traded the number 15 overall pick. They swapped. It looks like they swapped first round picks.
Okay, so 13 and 15 swaps.
So 13 and 15, and then the Jets, the Packers also got the Jets' second-round pick and a sixth-round pick, and then a conditional 24 second-rounder if Rodgers plays 65% of the snaps. And then the Jets got Rodgers, and they swapped 2 spots in the first round, and then they also got a fifth-round pick. So they didn't have to give.
Sorry,
I thought they were going to have to give up more. To be honest with you.
Oh, man, I think that's a lot for Aaron Rodgers right now. I don't know.
I think it's a lot for what he is right now as well. I just thought that they were going to give up more. They're only giving up 1 first-round pick. They're not even giving up a first-round pick.
Well, they're giving up 2 seconds, and that 1 second
Right.
next year can conditionally move up to a first-round pick. So
Can it? If he plays
more than 65%
okay.
of the snaps, then it becomes a
So
first.
it moves up to the first round. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do they have
Yeah.
2 first-rounders next year?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure at all about
Be
that.
interesting.
That's man. So if it ends up being a first, a second, and swapping, like it's pretty good value for what Aaron Rodgers is now, in my opinion. So
yeah.
Interesting. And that was it was the worst kept secret in the world that was going to happen at some point. It was just like, when is it going to happen? We know he's going to the Jets. When is it going to happen?
Yeah.
And finally did. So
I want to say this too. So Fifth Wheel says, so just roll with what we got then at free safety and strong safety. No, I'm not saying that at all. I flat out, I've said that I think Notre Dame should look for 2 safeties, in my opinion, in the pool if you can get them, but definitely 1. What I'm saying is I'm speaking specifically to RJ Moten and what I know of him. Now, again, I could go watch the film tonight and come away with a completely different story. It's just what I've noticed of how Michigan uses him and what he does, and just, his numbers. It doesn't, to me, move the needle. It doesn't really give you something that you don't have, or he doesn't improve upon something, because you can add a guy that brings the same skill set to somebody you already have, but he's just better at it. That's giving you something you don't have. It's a better version of what you have.
Yeah.
My comment simply that I don't think RJ Moten gives you what you need, and that's my point. I mean, I mentioned other guys, Cameron Kelly, some other guys that I would look at. I just don't think RJ Moten specifically would be the guy that I'd be fired up about, in my opinion. Because I think he's a box guy, and I don't. With the young linebackers you have, I'd rather play Jaden Alsbury if you're going to have somebody do that, honestly. So I'd rather play Ben Minich if he's healthy. And Ben hurt his hand; he didn't hurt his ankle or knee or back or anything like that, or shoulder.
Like he'll be back,
I'd rather see those guys play. Let them develop than some 220-some pound 6-foot safety that's an alley player and had a worse tackle rate last year than TJ Brown. So that's my point. But no, they absolutely need those things. Absolutely. No question. Yeah. No question. So, all right, let's get to some more here.
Next question is from Brandon Plensner, who says, do you think a 2024 wide receiver class of Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert, Jason Robinson, and Isaiah Canion is better than 2023's? Someone asked me on the board today, Brian. I don't know if it was Brandon or if it was somebody else. I think I would still take 2023 as an entire class. Yes.
The upside. Yeah.
But I would say Cam Williams is the best of the 8-man haul that would speculatively be. But I really do like that class still. I mean, I think it's a great class back to back after you just got Jaden Greathouse, Braylon James, Rico Flores, and Caleb Smith. It's a really, 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 really good class in back-to-back years. I think I just slightly prefer 2023 to 2024 if that's the end result, in my opinion.
To me, it's about the ceilings, Ryan. Look, I'll say this. If you look at it's a very similar class. Like to me, Cam Williams and Braylon James are very similar, except Cam's more polished.
Yes. Agreed.
Micah Gilbert and Jaden Greathouse are very similar, except Jaden's a little bit more. So it's on that one, it's Jaden's a little bit more polished. Isaiah Canion and Rico Flores are very similar athletes. I think Isaiah's bigger and faster. Rico's more polished.
Yeah.
And then Jason Robinson and Caleb Smith are very similar in how you're going to use them. So it's a very similar class. I just think the ceilings for the 23 group are just higher, in my opinion. But I'll say this, Brandon, and this is the best thing I could say about this. If you were sitting here and you were going to argue with me that 24 was better, I wouldn't argue with you about it.
Yeah, I said it. There's a case for it on the board.
I think 23. And here's the thing. We're also comparing what we've seen of the 24 class as juniors compared to what we've seen of the 23 class as seniors.
Yes.
Right? By the time we watch senior film, it could be a completely different story.
Right. Because Rico took a big step up from junior to senior years. So did Braylon. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Caleb Smith had much better senior film. So it's a debate, Ryan, Brandon. I definitely think it's worth a debate, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so, that's important. That's important. So, and then he said, who would play the slot in the 24 scenario? I mean, I think there's a couple guys that could play that. I think that Jason Robinson could play the slot. I think that
Micah Gilbert
could play the slot. Yeah,
Yep.
they both can play the slot in that scenario.
And it gives you a different variety of slots as well, because Jason is 5'9", 160 pounds, super sleek, understands the game really well. Micah Gilbert also understands the game well, but he's a 6'2", 200-plus pound package. So his movements are going to look a lot different, and they're going to get the job done in a different way. But man, if I'm a defense and I'm like, one play, Jason Robinson's your slot, and then you take him out and Micah Gilbert's your slot coming in, I'm just like, dude, what the heck, man? Who do I put in now? You got to mix and match slot defenders so much with that different type of conversation.
Yep. All right. You got some more questions here. Let's get to this from ND. I got to always say this name, Ryan. ND Estimate Trucking LLC. I just love that name.
Their question is, stating the obvious, Jaden Greathouse, Jabron Payne, Tyson Ford, and a host of other young guys physically look different than what what fans have been accustomed to at Notre Dame. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that what we've been saying for a while? I mean, honestly, like that's what we've been trying to tell y'all when we first went to practice, when we first saw these kids. Ryan, when you saw these kids at the All-American game,
yep.
You know, and this is what drives me nuts, man. It's like everybody wants to focus on what they see, and they see Drake Bowen in the All-American game trailing a guy by 15 yards in the pass game and think, oh,
can't run.
Can't run. They ignore two things. A, he had a bit of a was it a hamstring or something like that? And then B, that wasn't his freaking guy.
Wasn't his guy.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they just ignore the fact that he was one of the best linebackers the entire week of practice. You know, ignore it, but then you dive into the narratives and things like that. The thing that we've been telling y'all from jump with this class is different.
Yes.
They got guys that just look different, that play different. I mean, and it's such a great balance. You know, like you've got Braylon James, who's just all kinds of raw, but all kinds of talented. And so what do you compliment him with? Two of the most polished receivers in the country, in Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores. Rico was the best of all the freshmen from beginning to end of spring practice.
Yep.
And then Jaden comes out in the blue gold game and just plays phenomenal, looking like a veteran. You know what I mean? He's different. Charles Jagasol's a different looking cat. We haven't seen him yet, right? You look at defensively, Drake Bowen, Nolan Ziegler, Jalen Sneed, Jaden Alsbury. Those cats are just different than what Notre Dame has had. Christian Gray and Benjamin Morrison are just different level athletes than what Notre Dame is used to at that position. So that's really something that Coach Freeman has really added on defense. And it's been spotty on offense, but there's some unique athletes. Now, some of these unique athletes on the roster, even in the veteran classes, need to step up and take their game to another level. Deion Colsey has all the talent in the world, and he flashes it. Just got to see him be more consistent. Take that work level to another level. You know, Tobias has got that, but it's got one career catch. So there's still some questions there. But this team's got a lot of talent. And anybody trying to tell you that this is not a really talented football team they're just wrong. I'm not going to put nefarious motives behind what they say because I don't know most of these people, but they're just wrong. Yep. There's a lot to prove, but this team has got a lot of talent. And the younger classes have – I mean – Ryan, it wasn't that long ago that Jabron Payne, a spring like this, vaults him in the starting lineup. Yeah. That's not even on the table right now.
Yeah.
Because of Audric Estime. And he could be your third, fourth, or fifth guy. I mean, it's nuts. So this team is different than what we've had. It looked different, and more importantly, they move different.
They move very
and that's something that I think was it you or Sean that said that after the first practice you guys saw last spring and you watched Benjamin Morris and you're like, no. It was fall. It was in fall camp. And I think it was Sean. Were you at any of the fall camps, Ryan? Did you come?
I was at one, yeah.
And I can't remember who it was.
I think it was Sean, though. I think
it was the first time we saw Benjamin Morris and you're like, this cat's different. This cat just moves different. This cat just looks different. We saw that with Jalen Sneed last year. And as well, just like there's certain things he does. I've talked to people that have said that, like this Ziegler kid is just like, this cat's a different level. Like we liked him coming in, but he's just different than we thought. Josh Burnham's that way. I didn't even mention Josh Burnham. That's one of the freakiest athletes you have on your football team.
Yeah.
Now they got to learn how to play football, or they got to show they can play football. But athletically, how they move, these kids are really good. And there's a lot of these kids that were very accomplished high school players as well, Ryan, and that's important too. Jaden Alsbury and Drake Bowen and Preston Zinter and Nolan Ziegler were incredibly accomplished high school football players. Jaden Greathouse is one of the most productive receivers in the history of high school football in the state of Texas.
Yes.
Rico Flores, if he doesn't get injured as a senior, I mean, he's got 2,700 yards the last 2 years.
Yep.
And so those are the things you look at and say, it's not just athletically they're really talented. They're a bunch of raw kids, but it's also, you look at it and say, Ryan, these kids also have proven they know how to play football. And that's really impressive.
I think the 2023 class is just so
Actually, I was wrong, Ryan. Rico did have that. He did have his career catches. He had 184 career catches for 2,844 yards and 29 touchdowns. Rico Flores did.
It's pretty good, man. It's pretty decent.
Yeah.
Well, I think the 2023 class is a great kind of mixture of that too, Brian. It's like you have kids that played at some great schools. You just mentioned Rico at Folsom. You mentioned Jaden Greathouse at Austin Westlake. I mean, Cooper Flanagan played at De La Salle. Like, there's some of the best programs in high school football that are represented there. But then you also have the other side of the coin, man, where it's like, but you got some athletes too, man. I mean, Braylon James at 6'3" has been clocked in the 4.4s with a 38-inch vertical. You talk about Micah Bell running 10.3, 10.4 in the 100-meter. That kid could fly. Oh, and by the way, your 6'1", 195-pound running back that's going to be here in June, Jeremiah Love, just ran 10.54 in the 100 meters, man. Like, you got some freak shows on this team coming.
Well, I just told you that Rico's numbers and 2,800 career yards and think about this. Notre Dame signed a kid in Rico Flores. What did I say his catch numbers were, Ryan?
179, I think you said.
Yeah, so let's say for his career, he had 184 catches for 2,844 yards and 29 touchdowns for his career.
Yep.
And he's not even close to the most productive high school player that Notre Dame signed last year.
Oh, no.
Jaden Greathouse had actually same number of catches. No, I'm sorry. I was looking at Rico again. He had 200. Jaden Greathouse had 232 catches for 4,035 yards and 53 receiving touchdowns. He also had 4 punt returns for a touchdown.
And he did that in 1 year, by the way, the punt returns.
Yeah, it's just nuts.
Silly, man. It's silly. Nuts. It's 6A football in Texas,
both play
too.
Big time. They both play against big time competition.
Yep.
So it gets you fired up for what these kids can be. It really does. It really does. All right, let's keep rolling on here, Ryan.
Next question is from XA_the Dream.
Zay the Dream.
Oh, it's
like
Zay.
Xavier.
Yes.
Like I would say, Zay, like Xavier,
Gotcha.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
Question is, where do you guys have Cam Williams among the 2024 receivers, and is he the best wide receiver commit since when?
I have him in the top 5 right now, Ryan. He's in my top 5. Now, the asterisk to that is I haven't seen every big time receiver so far. So, but I graded him as a top 50 player. Like I have a grade in now some years top 50 could mean you're 23rd if it's not as deep of a class. In other years, you grade out in the top 50 and you rank 65th because it's a really deep year. The way it works for me is there's a point system and I grade you out and you achieve a certain number of points and I put you in the caliber. It's top 50 caliber prospect. Like I said, some years you could be 30th and have that same grade, and other years you can be 60, 65th and have that same grade. But, I mean, from what I've seen, Ryan, I mean, Jeremiah Smith is the best receiver I've seen so far in the 24.
I like Micah Hudson, man.
Micah Hudson's the second best receiver I've seen in this class. After that, I think Cam starts getting into the conversation of he's in the conversation of those next group of players.
With the Ryan Wingos of the world.
Yes. Now, Ryan was definitely ahead of Cam before last year.
Yep.
I didn't love Ryan Wingo's junior year, to be completely honest with you. He didn't take the jump from a polished standpoint that I'd hope he could take. He's still really raw. Cam took a big jump from a polished standpoint, and he got a lot thicker and faster. That's the other thing, too. Cam was always a bit more polished than Ryan was, but Ryan was the freakier athlete. That wasn't true after their junior year. And so but Ryan Wingo's still an excellent football player, prospect, especially if you have someone that you believe in as a good receivers coach. But Cam's in that conversation for me, Ryan. But I have you seen Jeremiah Smith?
I have, yeah. Yeah, he's very good.
I think he's a stud. I think he reminds me a lot of what Marvin Harrison Jr. was at same age. 6'4", 190, fast, stupid ball skills. I mean, just insane ball skills. Micah Hudson's a completely different type of player.
He's more like Odell Beckham-ish.
Yeah, 6 foot, fast, explosive. And also has great ball skills. I mean, that kid makes some catches for a 6 foot guy that you just don't expect to see a 6 foot guy make. Those are the two best receivers in right now.
Yeah,
Cam's in that next conversation. Where he ranks there, honestly, Zay, I couldn't tell you because I haven't seen all of the top receivers. So I'm just being fair. He's in the top 5 of what I have seen so far. But he's still very good. And as far as best win, I mean, again, we're comparing his junior film to Tobias Merriweather's senior film. And Tobias as a senior was better than Cam was as a junior. And Tobias is a little bit bigger. But Cam, to me, right now is more explosive than what Tobias was. That's the thing. They're different players. But, I mean, right now as a junior, based on just junior film, I mean, I'd say he probably is the highest ranked receiver for me since Javon McKinley back in 2016. I mean, Javon McKinley was a dude coming out of high school.
Centennial.
I still think the injuries really stunted his career a little bit, but he was he was special. He was much better as a junior than he was a senior.
Yep.
And that's the thing. It's like Javon as a junior. This is what I've said before. Javon as a junior had like 58 catches for a little under 1,100 yards and I think 10 touchdowns in the playoffs. Against De La Salle, against Orange Lutheran, against Gardena Serra. Yeah. I mean, it was just like it was against dudes. I think they actually did play Mater Dei. I'm actually going to have to go look at that. I think they actually did play Mater Dei. I have to check that one. But I mean, they're playing against teams where basically he's playing against Division I players every week.
Yep.
And he put up those numbers as a junior. He wasn't as dominant as a senior. But I'd say he's probably the highest right now as a junior, the highest graded kid since Javon McKinley as a junior. That's impressive when you consider how good Javon was at that time.
Cam's really good, man. He's a really good player.
Is. There's no doubt. No doubt. All right, let's get to some more here, Ryan.
Next question from Rob Osgood. So I may be mistaken, but if the 2025 class overall is better than the 2024 class, how would you decide the recruits better between the classes to go after?
It's what your need is, Rob. Honestly, it's like, what are your specific needs? You know, if your needs are immediate, then you're going to have to focus on more 24 kids. Hey, I need a guy that can come in and play at X position. You know, pick one. It may not be a great year at this position, but we need guys because we can't afford to wait till next year because we can't get 3 transfers at that same position.
Yeah.
That's part of it. Whereas if you're like, man, we're really young. Like, for example, I've said this. If you can't get some combination of 3 of Kingston, Bodie Cahoon, this is my opinion, right? I know we differ on some of these kids, but it's my opinion. Kingston, Bodie Cahoon, Chris Cole, Brian Huff, in no particular. I mean, for me, it's Kingston 1, Chris Cole 2, Bodie 3, and Brian Huff 4. If you can't get 3 of those 4, and you can only get 2 of those 4, then I'd stop recruiting at 2 in this class and push it to next year, because I think you're so good in your two classes in front of it, and the fact that Nolan and Jalen Seed both redshirted last year. So technically, you're going to have 5 linebackers on your roster this year with freshman eligibility. Plus, you get Kahanu Kia, as of right now, is going to be back in 2024. So from his mission. So I'm just not in a position where I'm going to force a third linebacker just because. I'm going to push it to 25 because it's a really good year at linebacker in 25. And I don't know that it's a great year at linebacker from a depth standpoint this year. Offensive line's another one. I'm not forcing a 4th offensive lineman in this class. I'm going to go get a grad transfer if I need one for a year. And I'm going to push to 20 because the 25 class to me just seems better. I'm sorry. Owen Strebig is better than some of the tackles they're recruiting in the 24 class right now. Forget next year. I'm talking about like right now, he's better to me than Kevin Haywood. Like right now. As a sophomore, he's better than Kevin Haywood is as a junior, in my opinion. As a sophomore, he's a better prospect to me than Grant Bricks is as a junior right now. So you think about those things. Tight end. right? That's another one we talked about. There's some really good tight ends in this class, but that's not a need beyond one in this class. So next year you're loaded again. There's some really good players, Nate Roberts and James Flanagan and some guys like that. There's a couple other kids whose name escaped me right now. It's a really good year. The kid from Georgia that's come up, Ryan Gee.
Yeah.
I'd say, hey, look, give me 2 next year, not this year. I'm going to use that second scholarship somewhere else. I'm going to use that for a second running back instead. Because you look at your roster, my needs may be there. You may have a need where right now a second running back is not a need, but I'm just looking at the roster saying there's a chance by the time you get to 2024, you don't have Logan Diggs or Audric Estime on your roster anymore. And you've already moved Chris Tyree to running back. Now, all of a sudden, a second running back is needed. It's needed. And so I would rather make a decision at tight end. Hey, we're not going to take a second tight end. It's a good year at tight end. It's a pretty good year at tight end, in my opinion, 24. It really is. Maybe not a lot of Michael Mayers or any Michael Mayers or Deuce Robinsons, but a lot of good ones. I mean, there's a lot of, the Priestcorn kid from Michigan. I wouldn't take him at Notre Dame, but that's a good football player. The Betancourt kid from Illinois, I'm okay them not taking him to Notre Dame. That's a good football player. There's a lot of kids like that, Rye, in this class. But Notre Dame doesn't need that second guy in this class unless he is a Michael Mayer or Deuce Robinson. And Jaden Riddell is not that, in my opinion. He's very good, but he's not that. He's a more 90, 75 to 100 kind of guy, in my opinion. Carter Nelson has big-time upside, but I don't know if I would necessarily use that. I'd rather use it on hey, let me save room just in case I'm able to get Elijah Rushing at the end or Keydron Young at the end, or you know what I mean? I'd rather do it that. And that's something that factors into this, Rob, is that kind of thing where what are your immediate needs on your roster? And that's going to have to factor into which position you're going to prioritize more.
Yeah, I think you hit on it perfectly. Its situation is always going to be different in this conversation, Rob. I mean, it's about projecting things out, and it could get really muddled at some points because it's like, yeah, what I project my roster look like in 2024 completely changes. Why does it change? Because a kid goes pro, that is unexpected. A kid gets hurt, that is unexpected. A kid enters the transfer portal, that's unexpected. So you're always gambling a little bit on playing to the future a little bit, or at least projecting to the future. But I think at the end of the day, man, it's don't take players that you don't really love. Like that's kind of where the point blank is, right? Because I think that forces so many problems because kids aren't stupid, right? Like they understand if they're a plan B or a plan C in some cases, right? Like there's a situation here where if it's not a player you don't love, don't force the number just to fill a need immediately because there are other options out there. And especially in today's world where the transfer portal is just so much more easily available to teams, you could find that grad transfer and find that immediate need somewhere else. And you find that need and you move on, and then you can recruit players that you really love. So don't force players that you don't love, in my opinion. And I think Notre Dame's doing a pretty good job at that so far, honestly, in this class.
Agree. We got a super chat down here, Ryan, from Alejandro Cornell. Thank you, Alejandro.
Alejandro says, not if, but when Notre Dame wins national championship. I love that optimism. Yeah. Will we have a fun show that night, and how will you celebrate? By the way, I think they win within the next 3 years.
Man, I hope you're right. Will we have a fun show that night? Yeah, we'll have a fun show that night. A lot. I mean, we'll try to be professional, but we're going to have some fun. We're going to have a lot of fun that night. There's no doubt. How will I celebrate? I mean, I'll be here with y'all. That's how I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to celebrate with y'all and then pass out because I'll probably just be so emotionally drained after that after the show, I'll just like crash. But
and go to the parade.
Yeah. I mean, how will I celebrate? I don't know. I don't know if I would celebrate per se, other than just being with y'all. Celebration to me that's more for the guys that earned it, and I will not have played any role. And Notre Dame wins the national championship won't have anything to do with me. So I guess I just look at that different. But I'll be super excited and super pumped, and I'll be here with y'all. I mean, where else would I be besides with y'all? I mean, that's my Notre Dame family. I'm going to be celebrating with y'all. That's where I'll be. So yes, sir. And no beef eater. We will not be doing that. We will definitely not be doing that. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Real quick, Nathan Milton asks, who is Keanu Kia? That's not quite how you spell his name.
Yeah.
He signed with Notre Dame as part of the 21 class and actually played on special teams at linebacker in 2021. But then he went on a 2-year Mormon mission, and he's expected back for 2024. So he missed last year and then this year. And then I believe because they're recruiting his younger brother, and he told you, Josiah told you that as of right now, Kahanu still plans on coming back to Notre Dame. Now,
correct.
I don't know if sometimes those plans change with kids. And I believe, there's been kids that have come back and not liked it here. I think Chris Badger came back and left. Or came and left, and some other guys just end up not coming to other schools. But the plan as of right now I believe he's going to come back. So you have to factor that in too when you're talking about recruiting, in my opinion.
I haven't heard Chris Badger's name in a long time, man. That dude struck people in high school, man.
Oh, he was a thumper in high school,
yes,
man.
he was.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Absolutely. Here we go.
Next question from Andre Tonsel. With Notre Dame recruiting at such a good to great level, do you believe that the competition playing time will become an issue with the players they are recruiting?
Oh, of course. That's absolutely, that's going to look. Here's the deal. As Notre Dame starts recruiting more and more good classes, you're going to see more and more transfers from older players.
Yeah.
Also because of the nature of the portal. You're just going to see it. Now, is it going to be as much as other schools? I don't think so, because most kids want to stay and get that degree. And most parents want their kids to stay and get that degree.
Yep.
But yeah, you're going to see that. And the other part of it too is, will the coaches allow competition? Part of the reason Lorenzo Styles transferred, part of it, it's not the only reason. There's just a lot of things that factored into it. But part of it is Lorenzo was closer to getting beat out by Rico Flores than he was passing up Tobias Merriweather, because they allowed those freshman receivers to come in and compete.
Yeah.
Same thing a linebacker. And I was very happy to see that. And it wasn't like hey, we're just going to play the veterans and you rookies stay on the third team or whatever. It was, okay, these guys are coming in to compete. And they told the freshmen that. Hey, Ryan, how many times did you and I talk about after you talked to a kid about it, and he'd say, yeah, the coaches told me not to come in, not to plan on redshirting, that they want me to come in and compete.
All the time.
Now, there's a couple linemen that were, talking about redshirt, but and they say, look, you're not promised anything, but we're bringing you here because we want you to compete.
Yep.
That's absolutely.
Jaden Greathouse's expectation was that he was going to be the number one receiver on this team this year because he had the opportunity to compete for that, right?
Yes.
So, yes.
And then he went out in the blue gold game and said, this is what I was talking about. So,
hey, man.
Oh, my goodness. All right.
Next question's from Beef Eater. Beef Eater says, Brian and Ryan, being in the business you are in, are you both able to enjoy the social nature of being at a game, or is it all business when you get in the booth?
It's yes on both, actually. Because it's like, so for example, look at the blue gold game. Got invited to the parent tailgate by several parents. So I went over there and had a chance to hang out with a lot of the parents. And there's some really awesome parents of these kids. You start understanding why these Notre Dame kids are so special when you meet their moms and dads, including some parents that aren't, that weren't very happy with me. Like, they were very nice and kind, but like, yeah, you're too hard on my kid. Okay, very fair. I appreciate you. But they were so respectful in it, and I actually gained respect for them for having the cojones to come up and tell me. But one of them I understood, because that guy would kick my butt. But like a mom, it was great. I told you who it was, right? It was actually the same parent. But it was really cool. And so I enjoy that. That's the social part of being at a game, right? But then once I get into the press box, it's work time.
Yep.
And, sometimes, so like last year for the Clemson game, Vince and I mean, the light show and all that. So Vince and I really wanted to hear the crowd and all that. So there's like this deck on the side of the press box. So Vince and I, even though it was really freaking cold and windy, we went out over there and when Notre Dame came running out of the tunnel and they were doing the light show and all that kind of stuff before the game. And we just wanted to experience it. Right. And so we don't get to experience a lot of that stuff during a game, which is fine. I don't really care about that stuff during the game a whole lot. But, so we enjoy the pregame. We've had tailgates, IB tailgates, and I think that's part of the social nature of being at a game.
Yep.
But this is my whole thing, is once you get up to the booth, it's you're now in your office. You're at your place of work, and you conduct yourself that. Now, look, we have fun up there, right? I mean, I'll go down and joke with Tim Priester and Tim O'Malley, and me and the Tims and Pete Sampson were having a good laugh at a bet that him and Priester had made, and I was talking to Tom Loy, I saw Matt Freeman, Kyle Kelly. So there's guys up there, and we talk and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, it's a social, but like once the game starts, it's work time, and so we try to do both. And I'm going to actually, one of the things I've told myself, Ryan, I'm going to actually try to do both a little bit more this year. is really enjoy being at the game more and just some different things that way. But that's why I'm a little bit jealous of my wife, because my wife is actually on the field for every game. She's down on the field taking photos, so she really gets to experience all of the noise and the conditions. And that poor girl, she came up to the press box on Saturday and she was freaking freezing, man.
I'm sure.
She's like, I've never been in outside where it rained, sleeted, snowed, and hailed all in the same, like in an hour. And that's exactly what happened in the first half of the game. There was rain, there was snow, there was sleet, and there was hail at different points in time in the first half.
I had to buy a poncho. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yep. All right.
Next question is from Jeff Luke. What do you think is going on in Colorado right now? I feel like I'm missing something here. Something happening in Colorado?
I think it's just talking about what Deion's doing. And look, I get that there's a lot of people that don't like Deion, and I'll be honest, some of his antics I don't particularly care for, but that's just Deion being Deion. Yeah. He could also be talking about how there's a bunch of dudes in the portal, maybe. But Deion said that the moment he got there. I mean, he sat there in that first meeting, was like, a lot of y'all aren't going to be on this team next year.
Yeah.
And basically what the spring was for Colorado is you got to show me something if you want to stay here. Yeah. That's basically what it was. And so, that's not a surprise. I mean, that when your head coach comes in your first meeting and says a lot of y'all aren't going to be here next year, and you inherited arguably the worst Power 5 roster Rutgers has a significantly better roster than Colorado coming into this year. Would you agree with that, Ryan?
In certain spots.
I absolutely believe overall, top to bottom, if I had to take one of the two, I'm taking Rutgers roster coming into before Deion got hired. Now Deion's brought Travis Hunter and I'm talking about before Deion, what he inherited, not what he's getting with train. I'm talking about what he inherited.
Yes, agree there.
Was the worst roster in Power 5. Now, he's been able to get Travis Hunter and Cormani McLean and Dylan Edwards and some guys like that, and he's improved the roster, but it's a mess. And he flat out said, some of y'all are going to be gone. And when you inherit that bad of a roster, you need to weed out some of those kids. Now, the problem is it's going to be hard to replace all of them just from a pure number standpoint. But it was a bad roster. So I expected a lot of that.
The transfer portal is going to open back up, though, folks, and he's going to get some more kids out of it. Like, it's going to happen.
Oh, yes. So, yes. Oh, yes. Beefeater asked, Brian, where can we see Angela's photos? So most of our lead stories are Angela's photos. I am going to put together a gallery for tomorrow. I'm going to put a gallery up with a bunch of her shots on there. So look for that at irishbreakdown.com. You'll find that at ours. And that's going to be something new we're going to do this year, is on Sundays we're actually going to take a gallery of her shots and put those up on Sundays. So yeah, we'll have a lot more of that. Okay, let's see here. Get down because we got to pass a couple of these because our show's getting a little bit long. Here's an interesting one from JP Buellsfeld. Thank you, JP.
JP said Kansas State football does not have a spring game. Really? They believe the negatives outweigh very much the positives, most specifically injuries. Do you believe Notre Dame should stop having a blue and gold game? No,
not at all.
Believe that. Don't not believe at all.
Nope. I'll say this, because if you were replacing it with a practice, you're gonna have the same thing. I think. Look, it's fun Tyler Buckner got hurt last year walking down steps.
Yes,
right. And I'm not saying that the joke. I'm just saying, like, I must say you can get hurt doing anything. Right. I remember when I was a kid one time, Eric Davis for the Reds went on the 15-day disabled list because he slept funny on a plane during a road trip. Like, guys can get hurt doing anything. You got to be smart during the spring, because you don't hammer kids physically as hard in the spring as you do in the fall. They're in a different place in their physical development in the strength program.
Yep.
So I think that's part of it. But Notre Dame was super, super, like, a big chunk of the kids that didn't play in the blue gold game could have played if it was a real game. Some, not all of them, but a good chunk of them. They were cautious with those type of things.
Yep.
And so, no, I don't, because otherwise you're just saying you're going to only have 14 practices. I don't think that's the case. You're not going to have just 14 practices. You're just going to have another practice where there's going to be, a lot of different things where, hey, we're going to scrimmage and have an inter squad and all that. I think the way that Notre Dame handled it was great. The starters played for a half. Some of them played in the second half. There's a lot of walk-on guys, a lot of young guys getting a chance to play, and they had fun with it. It was still competitive, but they had fun with it. And I'd say you're exposed. There's a lot less banging in that game, I'd say, than you had the Saturday before when they had their jersey scrimmage, which is when decisions were made. So, I mean, look, Chris Kleiman clearly has a reason for that. And I respect him as a coach. And they don't have the depth that Notre Dame has. They're in a different situation too. They can't afford to lose a Prince Colley to the portal or Lorenzo Stubbs to the portal and just replace them with another dude just as good. Kansas State's a different type of football team. So I think that factors into it as well. But no, I absolutely do not want to see them get rid of the blue gold game.
It's some of the limited access you get as a fan to watch the team as well. Like, I think it's also great for fans to be able to end the spring off in the right way. Like, it's for fans. I mean, it is. It's for the fans.
Yeah. Let's get to a few more here, Ryan. Like I said, I want to just I want to try to get to as many as we can, but we do have to wrap up here soon. This is from Archer, and I believe he's referring to Keon Keeley in this KK, Ryan, as you read this question.
Gotcha. Question is Cole Mullins a guy you could see rising to the national rankings similar to Keon Keeley last year? If so, how do you feel about the strength of the commitment if some big NIL schools get involved?
No, I mean, he's not that kind of guy. He's not going to be a 5-star. I had Keon as the best player in the country last year. And
Keon was different, man. He was different.
That he post All-Star games, post senior seasons, all of it. Keon was my number one ranked player. I mean, and for me, it wasn't even debatable, Ryan. I don't think there was no one else in the conversation for me. He was a clear number one player in the country.
When you take the positional value conversation in, like, I mean, in a vacuum,
I'm not even.
Caleb Downs.
I see what you're saying. Yes, I get what you're saying. You could argue a Dante Moore if you're going to take positional value. Correct.
Sure.
I'm just talking like when I do a top 100, there is no positional value. If you're a quarterback and you're the best quarterback in the country, but there's 35 better football players than you, then you're going to rank 36th. Like you were making that case earlier, Ryan, on a tweet that I saw you make about the draft. There's a difference between a big board and the projecting where a guy is going to get drafted because I'm taking positional value out of the equation. Bijan Robinson is one of the 5 best football players in this draft. Is he going to get picked in the top 5? Probably not because of the positioning that he plays. Yep. But that's different than saying, okay, I'm ranking the best players. Best players. And when I do a top 100, this is the best players. And Keon Keeley was the number one player in the country last year, and it wasn't even close. To me, I fully expect Cole Mullins, as he continues to progress, to be a top 100 player. Regarding the strength of his commitment, if some big NIL schools get involved, I'll say it again. I do not believe that Keon Keeley left because of NIL. Do I think some people around him were influenced certain ways? Yes. I believe, from everything I know, that Keon Keeley did not come to Notre Dame because Keon Keeley wants to be a top 10 NFL draft pick and play for a national championship. And the reality is, as much as I hate to say it, Bama is the better fit for that. Now, I think as a young man, Keon was a great fit for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But if your goals is to be a top 10 NFL draft pick and to play for a championship and your options are Notre Dame or Alabama, it's not really a challenge. So it wasn't that NIL was the reason. And I know everybody likes to use NIL and it's the boogeyman and all that kind of stuff, right? But you and I are very familiar with what led to Keon leaving. Do I think he got NIL money? Probably. But it wasn't like this. It wasn't like Jaden Rashada and Nico and some of these other crazy NIL deals. And if it was NIL, then there's other schools he would have gone to because Bama's not handing out as many of those big deals that some other schools are. So it was more of that. And so, sure, if Georgia comes calling, I'll get nervous. But at the same time, you can't recruit that way, man. You can't not take kids because you think that they're going to, if those schools start coming and he wants to take visits, then you find somebody else. I mean, that's just the way it works. But the kid gave Notre Dame his word. And until there's reason to doubt that, I'm not going to doubt that. Right. And that's the difference in the two situations. So, yeah, we'll see. All right, Ryan, let's get to some more here. All right. Yeah, here we go. Here's an interesting one.
From Jimmy Smith, he said, Coach B, what's your take on Tyler Buckner's arm strength? Certain media members have taken aim at his lack of arm talent.
I think there's a big difference between arm strength and arm talent.
Yeah.
And I've seen guys that don't, like Drew Brees had elite arm talent, elite, all-time Hall of Fame arm talent. He is not in my top 50 in arm strength. Like, not even close, right? There's a difference between the two. Danny Warfel was a brilliant college quarterback. He had one of the weakest arms I've ever seen in a starting quarterback for a national championship team. Ken Dorsey had a rag arm, but Ken Dorsey was a great college quarterback. Because at quarterback, Ryan, in college, NFL is a little different. You got to be able to fit the ball into some windows in the NFL. That just requires some arm strength on top of arm talent. I think Tyler Buckner has a lot of arm talent. He's got to harness his mechanics. But he's never been a guy that had a powerful arm, ever. I've never said, like, this guy's got a bazooka. I think C.J. Carr has a stronger arm than Tyler does at the same age. And Tyler was a brilliant player as a junior. But just pure arm talent or arm strength, C.J.'s got a better arm, in my opinion. But Dylan Raiola's got a phenomenal arm. I don't think he's a better quarterback right now than C.J. Carr. I wouldn't say he's got necessarily better arm talent than C.J. Carr. I think he's got a stronger arm than C.J. Carr. Now, eventually that arm strength can turn into arm talent, right? Because that's the thing, Ryan. Eventually arm strength can turn into arm talent, right? But arm talent doesn't turn into arm strength very often.
Sure.
You get your natural growth, but like you don't go from having you don't go from Danny Warfel as a freshman to Pat Mahomes as a senior because your strength program, right? That just doesn't happen. But that's quite the comparison there when you say right. And did you ever see film of Danny Warfel?
I mean, I remember him in the NFL a little bit more than Florida State days, obviously. But
go look up some highlights of Danny Warfel while we're doing this. You'll be like, oh my God, that guy won a Heisman Trophy. He had a terrible arm, but he could put the ball wherever he wanted to, and he could get rid of the ball. Like Jimmy Clausen didn't have a powerful arm.
Yeah,
he had some of the best arm talent I've seen. Oh gosh, yes. So, do I think he has arm talent? Yeah, I think he has good arm talent. When his mechanics are right, he has great arm talent. When his head is right, he has great arm talent. I mean, Tyler Buckner can make some throws because of his ability to change arm angles and stuff that there's just not a ton of guys can make those throws. I mean, there's not a lot of quarterbacks that can hit Jaden Thomas on that over route that he hit Jaden Thomas on last year. There just aren't.
Yeah.
You know? Are there guys with stronger arms? There's a lot of guys with stronger arms. J.J. McCarthy has a much stronger arm than Tyler Buckner.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily argue that J.J. McCarthy, if all things are equal, has better arm talent than Tyler Buckner. That's always been the debate, right, between those two. But just arm strength, it's not close. JJ's got a hose. He just doesn't know where it's going. You know what I mean? And he doesn't process information like that's my big knock on JJ McCarthy. I got to see him learn to process reads a lot quicker for me, Ryan.
Yeah.
And everybody talks about the game against Ohio State. He was throwing to wide open guys on like trick plays. He had some really nice throws in that game, but like a lot of the big plays were coming like dudes were wide open. That doesn't take a great quarterback to make those plays. So I think I don't know. You may disagree with that, right? Anything you'd like to add?
Oh, no. I mean, I need to see a lot more from JJ McCarthy. He's a one-year starter, right? Like I'm looking forward to seeing if Michigan opens up the offense a little bit with him because I mean, he is very talented, obviously. It's just, he was in a run-heavy offense last year that asked him more not to make mistakes than to make big plays all the time. So we'll see about McCarthy. Yeah.
I want to bring up, somebody said the portal is open until April 30th. My understanding is, Ryan, it's open, meaning you can jump in up to April 30th, but you don't have to make your decisions.
Yeah.
You don't have to make your decision by April 30th, correct?
100%. Yep.
You can land guys in May and June if I'm correct on that. You can only enter the portal.
It's open for people to enter. Yeah. Correct. Open for people to enter. Yeah.
Yep. So we'll see movement into May at a lot of these kids. So, all right. Get down to here a couple things here real quick. Let's see here. Let's go down. Oh, here's an interesting one from Archer.
Archer says, since 2000, Notre Dame ranks 11th in number of NFL draft picks from one school, 102 total draft selections. Do you see them jumping into the top 10 over the next decade? Michigan is next with 106, Oklahoma with 113.
Well, a part of that, Archer, is going to depend on who the coaches are at those programs. Like one thing Jim Harbaugh has done a very good job at Michigan, like a very good job, is putting guys in the NFL.
Yeah.
And he's had a couple really big draft classes in his tenure there. I mean, what was the one year? Was it the 2016 team? I think it was a 2016 team. I could be wrong. It could have been the 2017 team. But he had one of those teams in his early tenure, Ryan, that had like it wasn't quite LSU, Georgia, but it was deep. Yeah, it was the 2016 team. So the 2017 draft. Yeah, Jabril Peppers, Taco Charlton, Chris Wormley, Jordan Lewis, Delano Hill, Amar Darboh were all first, second, or third round picks. That's 6. Ben Gideon, Ryan Glasgow, Jehu Chasen, Jake Butt, and Jeremy Clark. It's 11 guys got drafted.
It's not the best result for them, though.
No, but he put them in the draft, right? And then
so
2020, so the 2019 team, you had Cesar Ruiz, Josh Uche, Ben Bredesen, Khalil Hudson, Michael Dana, Michael Owenu, Donovan Peoples-Jones, John Runyon, John Montelis, Jordan Glasgow. That was 10. And then 21 team had Kwity Paye, Jalen Mayfield, Nico Collins, Ambry Thomas, Cameron McGrone, Ben Mason, Chris Evans, and Cameron Cheeseman, some backup linemen. They put 18 guys in the draft in 2 years during that stretch, and then had, what did I say, 12 in the
12, yeah.
Coach Harbaugh's put a lot of guys in the NFL. A lot of guys.
Yeah. There's no reason to think that won't continue.
Yeah, with him there. Now, if he leaves in a couple of years and they replace him with the next Brady Hoke, that's going to change, right? So it's possible, but gaining 11 on a program like Oklahoma is going to be hard. It is. Now, do I think that Notre Dame is, if Marcus Freeman can keep recruiting the way that he is, and some of the guys that he inherited that I think are going to be NFL players, the next 3 years from Notre Dame, they have a chance to have some really big draft classes moving forward. Like next year's draft class, Ryan, has a chance to be really big. Chance. You're going to have Sam Hartman, who we both agree is going to get drafted barring injury, right?
Sure. Yep.
You're going to have one of the running backs, I think, is going to be in the draft class. Potentially Joe Alt.
Yep.
Potentially Riley Mills, right? Potentially one of the linebackers, potentially Cam Hart. That's 7 right there. And that's not even predicting any breakouts or Xavier. I mean, if Xavier Watts goes out and has a great year, he can leave out. He's a senior. He's going to have his degree. But then the next year is when it gets really crazy. So next year's class could have 7 to 9, just looking at it early, if some guys leave early. But then the next year, you start getting into whatever running back is left over. Tobias will be draft eligible. Dion could be that guy. Blake Fisher will be gone. Zeke Correll will be a guy that's looking to take that next step. If Riley Mills doesn't leave next year, then he's in that next. Oh, I forgot Javonte Jean-Baptiste could have a shot to get drafted if he has a big year. I mean, I'm not projecting it right now because we got to see what he's going to do. But I mean, he's got some athleticism that we've seen in practice. It's like really impressive.
Yep.
Benjamin Morrison's going to be part of that draft class. Then you could see that's when the Xavier Wattses and the Ramon Hendersons and some of those guys, if they break out. And then 25 is when it could get really nuts. Like, so I see Notre Dame starting to ascend these next couple years and really getting to that point the way that Marcus Freeman's drafting right now. But, we'll see. You got to prove it, right? I mean, that's the thing is we're basing it off of projection. They got to go prove and develop these guys. But 100%. I have a feeling it could get nuts. But I also see a lot of NFL players at Oklahoma. And they've always had NFL players. It's just that they don't get the most out of those guys. I think Notre Dame has out-recruited Michigan the last couple of years. But one thing Jim Harbaugh's done is he's turned a lot of guys that I would not have projected as NFL players coming out of high school into turning them then into NFL players in college. You have to give him credit for that. Whatever you think of Jim Harbaugh, right? And you mentioned it. Not a lot of those guys panned out because they were overdrafted. Because Jim Harbaugh's teams are well-coached and physical. And NFL teams like that. And then, of course, he's an NFL guy, right? And he knows people and they listen to him and all that kind of stuff. But he's put a ton of kids in the NFL, and that's not changing. I mean, they've got a lot of guys that are going to get drafted over these next couple of years.
Yep.
So it's an interesting deal. Very interesting deal. I want to answer this question here from Jason, Ryan.
Jason's question: with the recent players hitting the portal, does that mean Notre Dame hits the portal this year, or does it allow them to go after more 2024 kids?
Well, yes and yes. These obviously open up spots for the 23 team. But if they replace these kids with with graduate portal kids, then there's a chance that a lot of those, like Thomas Harper's leaving after this year, right? Sam Hartman's gone after this year. Javante Jean-Baptiste is a 6-year guy. So like a lot of their transfers, I think the only guy that I can think of that's a transfer that's got multiple years around, I think, is the kicker and the punter.
Yeah.
I believe, right? I think
Yeah.
Cole Aubrey's gone after this year, although he's a walk-on technically. So that's the kid from Princeton who is going to come to Notre Dame, but he's just going to be a walk-on. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that would be the kind of the portal guys that you're most likely going to see Notre Dame be able to get is those grad transfers. So it's you take them for a year and then you replace them in the 24 class.
Yeah.
Depending on the position. I mean, right now, I believe, barring injury or someone else leaving, I still contend, Ryan, that right now the only position that I view as a need in the portal right now is safety.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that if the right player at here comes along, that I wouldn't look at him. I would. But right now, the only thing that I look and say, boy, that's a need, is safety. That's it.
And Notre Dame's made that very well known. That is,
yes, they have not hidden that fact at all. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to some more here, Ryan. This is an interesting one. I never thought of this, but as soon as I read the question, so you know what? I think he's on to something here.
Corey Flynn says, I live near Brophy in Phoenix. Seems like Marcus pushing harder for Catholic school kids than Brian Kelly. Sal Points in Tucson, the Miami Catholic school kid that just committed this weekend as well.
You know, now that I think about that, Ryan, there's a lot to that. You can even go further, say the Catholic schools, but private schools in general. Yeah. Going after a lot of private school kids, but you know, he's on to something. I'm kind of looking at last year's class so this year's class, you've got 10 commitments. Moeller's a private Catholic school. The Hun School is a private school. Malvern Prep's a private school. Charlotte Catholic is a private school. So 4 of your 10 commits in this year's class are private school kids. That's actually a pretty decent amount. You look at last year's class, De La Salle, obviously private school. Bishop Alamant, Catholic school, I believe. Is De La Salle's a Catholic school, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Bishop Alamant Catholic, where Charles Jagasol went. So Bishop Alamant, the Catholic school where he went. Boubacar was from a Catholic school. Devin Houston, I believe, was St. James, I believe, is also a Catholic school. St. James is a Catholic school. Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Lawrence Central Catholic, where Preston Center went, is a Catholic school. I know I'm taking a leap here, but I'm going to go there.
It's good.
De Smet Jesuit, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's a Jesuit school. It's a Catholic school. And then Micah Bell went to the Kincaid School, which is a private school.
Yes.
So yeah, you're correct. There's a lot of private school kids that they're going after. Woodbury Forest, Armel Mookum. It's not a Catholic school, but that's also a private school. So a lot of Catholic kids, a lot of Catholic kids are there. So yes, a good call on that. Very good call on that. And we're seeing a lot more in the 24 class, Ryan. A lot of offered kids from, like I said, I know that they got the 410 or the 4 of the 10 are private school kids.
Yeah.
But you look at a lot of the other kids that are on the board. There's a lot of like Josiah Brown. Yeah, I don't know that they're going to get him. Micah Gilbert's a private school, Christian school kid. And I would throw Christian and Catholic schools in there together because they're going to have this. Notre Dame's going to have the same attraction to them, even though, you know, Christians and Catholics are different, but there's going to be a lot of attraction there in that regard. Jeremiah McClellan, there's not as high on the board anymore, but he's another private school kid, Catholic school kid.
Well, Elijah Rushing, obviously.
Yeah, Elijah Rushing, who was the one that he was talking about. Gearby Lambert's from a Catholic school.
Yep.
So yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting observation there. Yeah, I like that one. Bryce Young's from a private school. It's another one. Yeah. St. John Bosco, Jack Larson. He was part of the 4 of the 10 commits that we talked about. Kingston is from a private school, St. John Bosco.
Yep.
So I would imagine a Catholic school. But yeah, that's very, very interesting. And that's smart. That's very smart. I think that's very, very smart decision by Coach Freeman and staff. If it is intentional, which I would imagine it is, I would say so.
Next question is from Coleman Smith. It says, Brian, what happened to the over 2.5 commits this weekend? You had me pumped that they would have had a couple commits on Sunday.
Well, I would say that the over still looks good. It's just not all of them are public.
Yes.
I'll just leave it at that. So, and they had 2. I mean, they're 1 away, so it's not like they didn't have any. They were off by 1 public commits. They had 2 public commitments. So, yeah.
I would just say, I said it on the board earlier, but patience, Grasshopper.
Let it play out. Last 2 here, Ryan. So this is from Salty and then Ian Johnson, and we're going to have to get out of here because my wife's hungry. She wants to go out and get some dinner.
Salty says, Brian, on the segment you did with another guy and Ashley, ? During the local TV.
It's Allison.
Allison. Okay. Allison, during the local TV Blue and Gold pregame show, Tobias Merriweather was comped to Randy Moss. Do you concur?
No, I did not make that comparison. And no, they're very. Randy Moss was one of the fastest receivers to come into the draft. I mean, he was a 4.3 kid.
Yeah, 6'4". Like
he was a freak.
Yeah,
he was an absolute freak. So no, he doesn't.
One of the best athletes we've ever seen at wide receiver ever. So,
phenomenal basketball player. I mean, look, a future NBA point guard started on his high school basketball team and was not the best basketball player on that team. Randy Moss was. I mean, does that tell? I mean, I'm talking about Jason Williams because you remember, White Chocolate. They were high school teammates, and and Randy Moss was the best player on that team. Right. So, he was one of the craziest athletes I've ever seen.
Freak show, man.
Yeah, he was. So no, Tobias is nothing like him. They're completely different players. Tobias is polished and all of that good stuff. He is not a guy that I would consider.
Maybe they have similar-ish body types, I guess. But outside of that, yeah.
Definitely not. Definitely not where I'd go with that one. And then let's wrap up, Ryan, with this question right here from Ian Johnston.
Ian Johnston's question: who would you take, Malachi Williams or Elijah Rushing? Can we take both, or is that not an option based on numbers?
I have a hard time believing that Notre Dame would turn down either one of those 2 kids.
Yeah,
I have a hard time believing that. And honestly, I think that would allow. That's what we talked about there. If the right guys want to jump on board, they could get to 6.
Yeah. You want to talk about closing a gap? That closes a gap.
My gosh. Yes. With Cole Mullins and potentially Bryce Young with Justin Scott maybe inside and Owen Wafel. Yeah, that's a gap closing class.
Yes.
I don't anticipate them getting both of those guys, but wouldn't it be nice?
It would be tough. Yeah.
Look, here's the thing. Give me one of them, Ian. Like, who would I take? I'm good either way. I really am. And I know that's a bit of a cop-out.
I think Elijah's a clearer projection just because he's a more nuanced. But Malachi, I would say, has a higher ceiling than Elijah Rushing.
Yeah.
I really would say that.
I don't even want to. It's not that it's not that I don't want to answer your question like I'm afraid to answer your question. It's just it would depend on what is your need. Do you need a guy that can come in and play right away, or are you going to bank on the upside? I think they both have first-round NFL draft pick talent. I think the reason that Ryan's not wrong in his assessment of the ceiling is because Malachi is the more explosive athlete.
Yeah, he's a freak show,
in my opinion. Like Elijah's very smooth and fluid, but Malachi is explosive.
Yes.
So, it's just about what are you looking for? But goodness gracious, I'd take both of them. And I think both of them are an option because Elijah Rushing is the kind of kid that you just don't say no to.
Yes.
And Notre Dame wouldn't say no to. I mean, he's a big-time player. If I'm ranking him right now, Elijah Rushing is a much higher ranked player right now than Malachi Williams.
No doubt.
The floor is so much higher. And he's a very mature young man. And not that Malachi's not. It's just like when you think Notre Dame kid, I think Elijah Rushing. Mature, very good student, goes to a private school. He has a lot of polish on and off the field. I mean, am I wrong on any of these assessments of him as a young man?
No.
Big time talent. I mean, there's nothing about Elijah Rushing that doesn't scream Notre Dame kid. But as we've seen with defensive linemen, there's been some really talented Notre Dame kids that don't end up at Notre Dame. Keon Keeley being the latest example. Jason Moore, very much a Notre Dame kid. Went to a Catholic school.
Yes.
Didn't pick Notre Dame. But yes, Elijah Rushing screams Notre Dame kid to me. And so I'd love to see him get there. And then Malachi's just that. Malachi is Justin Tuck. Like that kind of just underrated kid that Although his ranking profiles jumped up quite a bit in recent months, Ryan.
As it should.
Yeah, as it absolutely should. So yeah, you're seeing Malachi start getting recognized a lot more where Justin Tuck never did. But like 247 or On Three and Rivals both have him in their top 250. I would say he probably needs to be a little bit higher, but whatever. I'm okay with it for right now. But his ceiling is enormous. So there is no losing scenario in this. And obviously the ultimate home run dream class. I mean, that's truly a dream class. Would be having Malachi and Elijah in the same class with Cole Mullins. Like that'd just be, oh my gosh.
Be pretty good. Be decent.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun, Rye. A lot of fun. So that's going to do it, Rye. Why don't you take us out of here, man?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody again for joining us for the show today, discussing a lot of the recruiting intel that we got over this past weekend, obviously the blue and gold game. So I want to thank you all for joining that for that segment. We were able to talk through Cole Mullins' commitment, Davion Dixon's commitment, and everything in between. Also hit a mailbag here at the end. So if you're joining us now, make sure to go back and listen to some parts of this conversation because I thought it was a tremendous one. 3.5 hours went by really, really fast. So I want to thank everybody again. Hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast. 5-star reviews are always very much appreciated on any of your favorite podcast platforms. Also, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Continued recruiting intel from this past weekend. Continuing team analysis as we wrap up this spring. From Brian Driscoll, I am Ryan Roberts. We want to thank you all again for joining the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour on the Irish Breakdown podcast.